All right. So we remind ourselves of our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings, and reiterate our altruistic reason for doing this activity. The ideal one, the long-term one, is one of bodhicitta, which we'll go into more detail. This aspiration, you could say, based upon great compassion. Such is the suffering of others that it's unbearable, and that we have no choice but to never give up helping others, and never give up with the long-term in mind of removing all the pollution from our own mind and becoming an enlightened being, because then we're qualified to perfectly help others. This is the idea of bodhicitta. So we have to start with the thought. It's okay if you don't have even much love and compassion for even one person right now. Don't worry about it. Understand the logic of it. Put the seed in the mind. That's the idea. Have the thought. As Lama Zopa says, everything exists on the tip of the wish. This is the very essence of the meaning of the idea of karma. That what happens in our mind produces what we become. So thoughts, seeds, wishes, aspirations, they will program our mind. So it's program our mind with bodhicitta, this thought. That's why we're going to listen to the teachings, take some tools from it to apply in our lives. Sangye chodang soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye dropasho Sangye chodang soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye dropasho Sangye chodang soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye dropasho. Excuse me. So this practice, which is the topic of the weekend, Vajrasattva, is the visualization of this Buddha is the third of 4 steps in the process called the 4 opponent powers. And these 4 steps are 4 psychological steps, obviously, not steps your feet take, but the steps your mind takes. In this process of weakening, eventually, or purifying, as they call it, negative karmic imprints. And why would you want to do that? Why would you want to purify negative karmic imprints? Because you don't want them, they're the cause of suffering, Buddha says, because what we do and say and think sow seeds in the mind that will ripen in the future as my suffering. We logically know we don't want suffering, so therefore we want to try and change, pull out the weeds, basically. So let's look at, we discussed last night a bit, but let's look at it here, what it means, Vajrasattva, and what these 4 steps are. And if we're trying to remove causes of suffering, we better know what suffering is. So let's unpack these terms. And in that way, what we do is basically look at the whole Buddhist path and how this practice fits logically into the bigger picture. So Buddha's fundamental point, that underpins all the Buddhist teachings, the Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist psychology, the Buddhist practice, which is the application of all those things in your daily life. What underpins it is this observation of the Buddha's, his own direct findings, that there is the possibility to achieve cessation of suffering. So putting it in that negating way sounds a bit abstract, doesn't it? Oh, I really want cessation of suffering. We don't talk like that. We want happiness, yeah. We don't want to suffer, yeah. But putting it into a state called cessation of suffering sounds a bit abstract. Well, that's equivalent to what he means by nirvana, basically. This word nirvana. It means cessation. So cessation of suffering and its causes. So of course, to make it tasty, we have to hear the implications of that. How would you be if you had ceased suffering and its causes? So of course there are two, we can say, there are two levels of this. You've achieved the nirvana of your own liberation if you've, the first stages of development, or if you become a Buddha, then there's that nirvana, you've ceased even the subtlest imprints in the mind of negativity. So in order to understand this then, if Buddha's point, his fundamental point, which as I said underpins all the practices, because where you're heading on this path, in this course that we're involved in, is the cessation of suffering and its causes, and eventually on the Mahayana, the Mahayana nirvana, Buddhahood. So like we talked last night, Buddhahood, enlightenment, Buddhahood, or full enlightenment they call it. This is the natural potential of all beings. So this is, to even get clear intellectually, is so important to understand. Otherwise there's no reason to keep practicing trying to be a better person. If you can't finally achieve being a better person, what's the point of trying, You're just wasting your head, bashing your head against a brick wall. So it should give us some energy, some confidence to know Buddha's observation, Buddha's findings, Buddha's view from his own direct experience, that this goal is an attainable goal. If it's not an attainable goal, why bother? It's a complete waste of time. If such a place as, New York doesn't exist, why try to get there? People talk about, enjoy the process, you never get there. I mean, that's a nightmare. Don't bother going if there's no New York. Be practical, please. People talk about a spiritual path, you just enjoy the process, you just keep going, and you never achieve anything. I mean, it's like a nightmare to think this way. Just relax, please, and enjoy Boston. Well, I'll enjoy my coffee, excuse me. So, Buddha's being very practical. There is a place called Buddhahood, and he has a map of how to get there. And it is an attainable goal, this cessation of suffering. And its causes. So before we go anywhere, before we really understand this, we'll talk about it in the context, let's talk about all these, let's analyze all the parts of Buddha's path by looking at the four opponent powers, and then we'll unpack each one as we go. Okay, so the first of these four, there's different ways of presenting these four steps. This practice is outlined in your notes there, you've got it in your notes there. The last practice, the last thing, page 77. This practice. How to do it, but in the earlier things in the book, there are explanations of what I'm talking about right now, the four opponent powers and how karma works. These two main things, they're all in there. Okay, so the very first of these four steps, and they can be presented in a different order, but the order that I present in there, and what I'm talking about here, is the order that I find very tasty, very helpful. And there's the 4 R's. I always remember a friend of mine somewhere, a nun in Adelaide, talked about the 4 R's. Whether she got it from someone else, I don't remember, but I heard it from her. So I like the 4 R's. It's a good way to remember them. So, the first one's regret. So what's regret? Or we could spend the rest of the day on each of these, actually. So I have to hurry up, because, no time. Running out of time already. It's already 10:30. I've got to talk faster. So regret, I'm making a mess now, look at me. So regret, what's that? Such a simple word. Well, as soon as we hear regret, we go guilt. We spend the rest of the day on that one too. We go, I'm a bad person. So His Holiness, the Dalai Lama very nicely said one time, when the person asked what's the difference between regret and guilt. Well, regret, he said, and we'll unpack it. Regret is recognition, guilt goes, in the past I did this and I did that and I did this, and then the conclusion is, and I'm a bad person. And we never question that assumption. We assume because I did a bad thing, therefore I'm a bad person. And we don't doubt that. We almost think they're one thought, but there are two thoughts there. So the Dalai Lama says, His Holiness said, the first part's the same. If you think of regret, you look in the past, and I did do this, and I did do that, and I did do this. Yep. But then your conclusion is different. You don't say, I'm a bad person. You say, what can I do about it? That's what completely transforms. So let's unpack this idea. What are we going to regret? What are we going to regret? We're going to regret, in Buddhist terms, actions that we have done first, with our body and our speech, that harm others. So what does this mean? Well, this is Buddha's view of what morality is. And this itself is so interesting and really important to get clear. Really important to get clear. So our usual view of morality, we briefly discussed this last night, our view of morality, we tend to have an assumption that morality is a set of laws that somebody from on high, mummy, daddy, God, the police, the judge, the government, has imposed upon us down here, and we should obey it. This is for us such an assumption. We don't question this assumption. And we like to blame the Catholic Church or our Jewish mother for this. But no, Buddha says, we come born with this assumption because that's part of the view of grasping at things as inherent, which maybe is a bit abstract to us right now, but never mind. So, and indeed this view of morality, if we do have faith in a creator, is a valid view, nothing wrong. I asked a Catholic friend of mine, a priest, what is a sin? And he said, by definition, what is it? He said, it's going against the will of God. Now that's perfect when you're a Christian, because you see that there is a being who is out there, who is the source of the universe, who is perfect, who is the creator, who runs the show, who invented me, invented the laws of morality, and therefore is to be obeyed. That's perfectly reasonable, actually, in that view. It's not the Buddha's view. Very different. But if you have that view and you have faith in God, then my sense is if you're really a perfect Christian or a perfect Muslim, people don't like to say this, but actually I think it's logically true. If that's your view, then you must have complete faith in God and that everything is God's will. And whatever happens, it's cool. Now, who likes to think that? We love to think God made the world, but then we complain and moan when things go wrong. Because it's really intense to think that view. But that's the person who'll be happy, who accepts whatever happens as God's will. I don't know what God's plan is, it's not my business. It's God's will, I'll accept. That's pretty intense, it's pretty amazing, and I do not criticise it, that's profound. If that's your view. Well, it ain't the Buddha's view, that's all. So within that context, then morality is doing what God said. So being immoral is doing what God said not to do, and therefore, naturally, you must beg God to forgive you. This is reasonable, and this, you see, this is how we assume morality is. So if we've given up God, let's say we don't think we're Christian anymore or Muslim, but we still have that view. We apply it in our daily life, don't we? Mummy says do this. Why? Because I say so. And that's then, having that view, we then need to get Mummy to forgive me if I do something wrong. Now that's our view in daily life. If I do something wrong in my relationship, I have to have you to forgive me. I need you to forgive me because I hurt you, That's fine. But it's all based upon this dualistic idea of this idea of morality being something up high, inherent, that is imposed, We've got to really look at all this. So the Buddha's view of morality is different. And actually this Catholic priest told me, he said, yes, we agree with that one, that there's a natural law. That killing is somehow wrong, But let's look at what Buddha says, what is wrong. In other words, this first step, what would I be regretting? I would be regretting the actions I've done to harm others. So why would I regret them? What are the actions I would regret? And then second, why would I regret them? What's the logical reason? Well, the first thing I would regret is an action that I do to harm another. And that is the definition of the Buddha of a negative action, of an immoral action. An action done by my body and my speech that harms another. That's the definition of a negative action, or a sin, if you like, according to Buddhism. Nothing to do with against Buddha's wishes. That's not the point. When I was a little girl, that was the point. My mummy said, don't do it, and I would have been a smarty pants and say, why not? And she would have said, because I say so. And I needed to do that. I needed to do what Mummy said because she was the boss and she was trying to discipline me and help me learn. But if here I am nearly dead, close to death, meaning I'm old, still believing that lying is wrong because Mummy told me it was, you can't hear my point. You'd think poor Robina, she hasn't grown up yet. So it's not enough to think that something is wrong, and that's what we think morality is. We don't unpack it like this. We don't analyse it. We don't go into it. That's why we have all this guilt and shame, and this is why we try to hide what we do. Get away with it, we say. What do we mean by get away with something? That nobody saw us do it. Then we assume, oh, I didn't do anything. No one saw me do it, therefore it's okay. Just listen to the assumption there. This is obvious what we mean. It's obvious we have this view of morality being imposed by somebody else. And if they don't see me do it, it's okay. Which proves we think of it as something externally imposed, Well, Buddha says it's far more fundamental than this. A negative action is one that harms another, but the point of it is when I do it, I harm me. I harm me. So whether anybody sees me do it is irrelevant. This is absurd as is thinking whether you go to the doctor and she says don't smoke, you might get cancer. And then I go home and I go, oh, well, the doctor doesn't see me smoke, I won't get cancer, puff, puff, puff. I mean, people will think you're mentally ill. Because they know that what a bad action is smoking. What's the result? It'll cause cancer. But because we don't think of it as morality, this heavy-duty kind of thing that makes us anxious and neurotic, we're such children about it. Because we don't unpack it. Are we communicating here? Yes. So the doctor is a messenger who, from her own experience, can say to you with certainty that cancer can be one of the results of smoking cigarettes. So she's giving you advice for which you should be absolutely grateful. But then we hear God says, then we hear morality, and we hear that God says if you do bad action, that God will punish you and send you to hell. All right? So if we have faith in God, we will honour God's wishes because we don't want to go to hell. Nothing wrong. We'll do what God says. Good enough. It keeps you on the straight and narrow. Go for it. But then we hear Buddha say that there are hell realms and killing will cause you to go to hell. And we think, oh God, here we go again. Nothing's different. But it's exactly the same as the doctor telling you that if you smoke, you'll get cancer. First you have to have confidence in that doctor. This gets us to the second step actually, which is refuge. We'll go there in a second. Okay, so what we're going to regret is actions that we have done with our body and our speech that have harmed others. That's the definition for the Buddha of a negative action. And listen to this, it's a dependent arising. It's easily provable. You will do a survey in this room. And I'll ask you all, do you want to be killed? Do you like being killed? Do you like being lied to? Do you like being stolen from? You'll all say no. Well, Buddha says, good enough, that proves it's a bad action. So in other words, it's a dependent arising. It's also empty of inherent existence like everything else. A negative action is by definition one that harms another. That's how you can establish it quite quickly. Okay, you can get more subtle than that. You can get far more than the few that Buddha lays out, these 7 in the 10 non-virtues. You can have thousands of different, don't punch, don't do this, don't do that, don't stand on people's toes. But broadly speaking, don't harm others, Pretty good, pretty reasonable. Not complicated. A good piece of advice. And remember, Buddha is like a doctor. Buddha is not a creator. Buddha was a regular guy like you and me. Buddha became a Buddha. He was a regular person who became an enlightened being. So therefore, his instruction is from his own experience like a doctor who became a doctor and got some wisdom. So can give you good advice about what to do and what not to do in order to stay a healthy person. Buddha is exactly like that. So therefore, guilt is completely irrelevant. And blame is completely irrelevant. They're the modes we have now. So right now, this is why this is a good analogy for the purification process. It's as if you've taken poison. We know when you've taken poison, there's poison in your dinner, your response won't be, oh, I ate poison, I'm a bad person, guilt. It's completely absurd. Then you sit there miserable, getting sicker and sicker, and you keep feeling guilty. I mean, it's a totally impotent state of mind, a useless state of mind. Useless. And it's just negativity. It's internalized anger. Well, the other option we have is, who put poison in my dinner? That's called anger. Then you go and sue Marlboro while you keep smoking. Mm-hmm. That's anger. Same as guilt, except it's others who are the object. Well, the third one we have is denial. Someone says there's poison in your dinner. There is not. We live in these three, which are all these dualistic responses to the neurotic way we are, and neurotic responses to the way we are because of this ego grasping we have. But the Buddha says it's It's a really practical issue. So at the end of the day, the first thing you do is you're going to sit down, you're going to regret. You're going to tick off the various things you did that day, for example, that harmed others. And now we get to the really crucial point of the component of regret. And this is not what we're used to thinking. Why would I regret it? Well, mostly we just go, well, I killed the dog, and killing's just wrong, Why are you regretting it? Well, it's just wrong. If you're a Christian, well, God said I shouldn't do it. Or if you're this and that. But why is it wrong? Because it harmed another. But this is the point here. This is the point here. The reason you want to regret it is for your sake. This is the first step. This we're not used to thinking. This we are not used to thinking. And this is the exact point about karma. The Buddha says, everything we think and do and say, without exception, if you like, leaves seeds in our mind that will necessarily, being seeds, ripen in the future as our experiences. It's not a complicated concept, but it's like we're so believe in the opposite that we just can't hear the words. It's not complicated to say that. That's an easy sentence. Everything we think and do and say leaves seeds in the mind, imprints in the mind, that will produce our future experiences. It is not complicated. It's not like emptiness. You've got to squeeze your brain. But we're so distant from thinking it's this way, we just don't hear it. So if this is so, and this is the basis of a Buddhist practice, then obviously, just like we know is true, everything I put in my mouth, called food, will produce certain results in my body. Hardly rocket science. We get this deeply. We are geniuses at this one. And we don't think of it as morality. We think of it as common sense. Because the assumption is, I want to be healthy and don't want to suffer. That's reasonable. Well, that's exactly the same thought here. But it takes time for us to process this. The Buddha says, everything we think and do and say will necessarily produce my experiences in the future. So let's unpack then that means the factors that determine what is called a negative action and what's called a positive action. Not coming from Buddha, not set in stone, not being imposed from on high, not inherent, but dependent arisings like everything else that can be proven. So what is a negative? So let's look at a negative action called killing. Buddha would suggest that killing any sentient being is a negative action because any sentient being doesn't like being killed. Do your homework, check the mouse, check the ant, check the dog, check the human. They don't look like they're going to be killed, don't like being killed when you start to kill them. Look at it. So we can deduce pretty quickly from this that all sentient beings don't like getting killed. Good enough. So we can just take it for the moment that killing is something that sentient beings don't like. So for this reason we call it harms them. So for this reason we call it a negative action. But now let's look at what it is. This is the point. And what it is that goes on inside me when I do it that causes me to create negative karma. They're two separate things. Merely doing the action of killing, it doesn't necessarily follow. This is the Mahayana interpretation. It doesn't follow that you create negative karma. It's not assumed that you do this. Equally, when you do a virtuous action. So what's a virtuous action? Well, giving someone money is called a virtuous action. A virtuous action is one that makes others happy, that helps others. So that, we can say that easily enough. But what is it that goes on inside me when I do that action of giving that causes it to be a virtuous karmic seed planted in my mind for me? They're two separate issues. This is so important to understand. Okay, it's the Mahayana approach. There's a mouse in my kitchen. I always use the same example. It used to be an ant, now it's a mouse. And we'll use different scenarios. So this is the point. It's obviously more complex than this in every normal situations, but this is really narrowing it down to the main components. Because the action, a negative action is also a dependent arising, like a dog or a person. So you can break it down into its component parts, because everything that exists in dependence upon its parts. So an action can be broken down into its parts. And the parts of something make up the whole. So we need to understand those parts in order to understand the thing itself. Okay, so what are the parts of the action called killing the mouse in my kitchen? Well, killing, we know, is taking the life. So there has to be the first step. The four main components have to be in place in order for this action of killing the mouse to become what they call a fully ripened result, a type of karma that's called a fully ripened result, which refers to the type of rebirth that it will cause, many of them, when those seeds that small seed multiplies and brings many fruits. The fruits are called a fully ripened result is a type of rebirth. There are various ways in which our karma ripens. Okay, or it's called a throwing karma. Okay, so there I am. The first step is, it has to be the intention in my mind. There has to be the thought, I will kill the mouse. This is the one I just said before, as Lama Zopa puts it, everything exists on the tip of the wish. This is so evident, but we so take it for granted we just don't notice it. But it's obvious everything we do depends upon the thought first. We might notice it depends on the thought, because many of the thoughts are instinctive because we've practiced them to perfection, and that's why it's hard. But we know perfectly well the main cause of my walking out the door is not my legs. If my mind is sitting here thinking, I'm enjoying sitting on this chair, believe me, my legs won't pick me up and rush out the door. Because my mind runs the show. Our trouble is we don't see our mind, so we think we're crazy. We don't think we think things before we do. But it's all instinctive, but it's all there if we unpacked it enough. So the first step has to be, in this action of killing a mouse, the first thing, the crucial thing that's got to be present is the thought, I will kill the mouse. Then obviously there's got to be a mouse, second one. Third, I do the action, or I get you to do it for me. Fourth, the mouse dies. Before me. And I rejoice. That's a complete action, they call it. That if I leave that seed in my mind, like all seeds will grow and multiply, and bring many, many, many fruits of lower realm suffering, lower realm rebirth. This is Buddha's observation. We'll go into this. Okay, so let's unpack it further. Let's look to the piece called intention, and let's look at the component parts of intention. Unpack that. And this is where we get to the crucial component in the Mahayana called motivation. And this is the main one. This is the main one. From the Mahayana point of view, this is the main one. And you'll see my point very clearly. This is the main one. You see, right now, there is always a reason. Motivation is what they mean when we would say, what's your reason for doing it? They use the word, the Buddhists, the Lamas, the Tibetans, the word motivation, which sounds a bit different for us, the way we think. We just say, why are you doing it? So if you're sitting in the kitchen, you say, what are you going to kill the mouse for, Robina? The Buddhists would say, what's your motivation for killing the mouse? We'd just say, what's your reason? Well, it's obvious. Oh, God, I can't stand mouse. What do you think? Hate mice. That would be our normal reason. Would you not agree? So that's called your motivation. And in other words, we've got to unpack that intention, to get behind it, to see what is causing me to go, I will kill the mouse. And it's obvious if we look at the world, when an action that's called killing, it's motivated by either two things mostly, you check, aversion or attachment. Maybe I'm really attached to eating, mice legs. Now, you can completely see the difference, can't you? If I hate mice, the bloody, I want to smash, Or, oh wow, look, a mouse. Quick, kill it, I can't wait to eat its legs. Very different energy in the mind, isn't it? One is attachment, which is what propels us to fish and kill bears and things. You eat bears? I don't know. Whatever, you get my point. Or mostly, let's face it, the main one in the world, what causes so much pain, is the anger, aversion. It's obvious. If you look at the world, it's obvious. It's obvious. So first is the intention. I will kill the mouse. And then packed into it so tight is the reason behind it. And that is the piece for the Mahayana that is the main cause of why I create negative karma or put a negative seed in my mind when I do it. That's the motive. That's the cause. So let's say Tara has a mouse in her kitchen. Oh, where's Tara? There she is. There's Tara. Tara has a mouse in her kitchen. Same scenario. She sees the mouse. There's an intention. The mouse is there. She does the action. The mouse dead. But let's look at her motivation. That one component in those pieces, the one component called motivation. She sees the mouse as suffering. She didn't mean to. She stood on it and she didn't mean to. She didn't even see it. So now it's suffering. Or forget even whether she killed it. That makes it complicated. She didn't cause the suffering. She just sees a suffering mouse and she's seeing it's dying in agony. So she, this is the typical way in the world. Huge compassion, as well as fear, of course, her own fear, her own attachment. Let's say there's compassion there too. Poor mouse, oh my God. And then, of course, being in the world, the way we tend to think, this is coming from the Christian teachings, which is our culture. God, I was taught as a Catholic, God made all these creatures. They don't have souls. He made them for us, our benefit. We're the masters. I'm not complaining, I'm just telling you. So even though many of us are not Christian anymore, this culture is very strong. So we have the view, so in the West we mightn't say they don't have a soul, but we say they don't have consciousness, They only have baby brains. So they don't suffer. So that's why we tend to think it doesn't matter if you kill a mouse. In fact, it's good if you kill a mouse. Because they're vermin, they make lives for humans not comfortable. So whatever. But this is a very common view, isn't it? So she'd go, oh my God, poor mouse, look at it suffering. Then she'll go, I must kill it to stop its suffering. This is common. We know this. It's called euthanasia. We do it for our grandma as well. Isn't it? Okay, let's unpack this. On the face of it, she has the intention to kill the mouse. The mouse is there, she kills it, the mouse dies, and she's relieved. The mouse is dead. If no one if no one heard us speak, they'd see us, they'd see two same actions. Tara killing a mouse, Robina killing a mouse. As far as the mice are concerned, they're just two dead mice. That's the same for them as well. But the difference is huge. Because her reason was to help the mouse. So look into her mind. It's a practical thing. What was in her mind was a softness. What was in her mind was a wish to alleviate the pain of the mouse, right? She had no thought to harm it. She wanted to stop its harm. Stop its suffering. I wanted to cause it harm. I didn't think of it too deeply. Just this aversion rose up and smash. Kill the wretched thing. We can see they're different actions. Mental actions. Intention is the same, object is the same, killing is the same, result is the same. Dead mouse. But the difference in karma that each of us creates, and this is the point, is obviously more nuanced than that, more complicated, more complex when it comes to all this process. But this is a simple way of pointing out the centrality of the piece called motivation in determining the quality of the karma I create, and therefore the result that will come to me. Are we communicating? Yes. Mm-hmm. And this has got nothing to do with being seen to kill a mouse, not seen to kill a mouse, punished or reward. There's no dualistic concept like that in Buddhism. There can't be if Buddha's view is the way it is, which is mind is a continuity of mental moments and everything the mind does creates its own experiences. It's an unnecessary embellishment to impose a creator on top of that. Or to have someone come into the kitchen and say, oh, what a naughty girl you are, Robina, you killed the mouse. And if no one comes in, I think I got away with it. Or, equally, for Tara to think, oh, no one saw me be kind to the mouse, oh, boo-hoo, I must be a bad person. So this is where we can see we are desperate for someone to praise us, to say, oh, aren't you a good person? Or indeed, to hide our naughtiness, because we don't want to be seen as a bad person. So that's where all our guilt and neurosis and attachment to reputation come from. We can see. Because we need to be seen by others to do good, and we don't want to be seen to do bad. This runs our lives, this dualistic approach. All contrary to the Buddhist view of karma, which, if we cultivate in our minds, brings this view of accountability, view of responsibility, energy of responsibility. It's nothing to do with whether I'm seen to be good or bad. We have to cultivate this. All of this is implied in regret. By understanding karma, understanding how it works, understanding what a negative action is, understanding the factors that determine something to be negative, all this comes from studying the teaching. This doesn't come by saying the word regret. and the one cultivating the view of regretting killing because I don't want the suffering results. In other words, it's got to be real like horror at the thought of the future suffering results, just like it would be if you don't want cancer, just like it would be if you know you've eaten poison. No one has to convince you to go rushing off for a doctor and get the antidote. No one has to convince you that you should regret it because it's going to cause you suffering. No, you're glad someone has told you that you could get cancer. You don't say, how dare you tell me I'm going to get cancer, you're going to punish me with cancer, who you naughty person. That's how we think of morality now, like children, you know, like as if it's punishment. Nothing to do with punishment, but it's hard to hear. It's a natural law, Buddha says. It doesn't need running. It don't need punishing and rewarding. It's a natural law. It simply occurs. This really takes time to hear it. So, a negative action by definition for the Buddha is an action that harms another. But the crucial point here, in this first stage of development, in this first process, first stages of practice, which is where, you know, this practice of the four opponent powers comes in the first scope of practice, in understanding the laws of karma, that when I do a negative action, when I do any action with my body and speech, this is the Mahayana interpretation, okay? The key factor that determines the character of that action, and therefore its consequences, is not the action itself, is the reason behind it, the motivation. But this is getting a bit complicated now, because in the first stages of practice, which is the Hinayana level, it's just, there's no discussion of motivation. The rules here, the ones of the, you know, the 10 non-virtues and the 5 lay vows, there's no wiggle room. There's just don't do it. Back off, control your body and speech, and don't kill, don't steal, don't lie. And then when we do the regret, it is best to regret deeply the killing, lying, stealing, this, that, blah, blah. You know? Because why? You have to say because why. Because I don't want the suffering results. This is the one that really takes time. We will happily say we regret, but it just feels like guilt. We don't really know why we're regretting. We just think, oh, I should regret to be a good girl, you know. And mostly because it's just we haven't unpacked it. We haven't made it a new experience. We just think, oh, I should regret because I'm supposed to. But it just ends up feeling like guilt, and just nothing changes. You get more miserable. And that's why we can't bear our own responsibility for doing bad things, because it feels like I'm a bad person. We've got to unpack it and restructure our thinking. Are we communicating? Mm-hmm. So negative action is one that harms another. But what makes it cause me to sow a negative seed isn't the doing of it. This is the Mahayana one, is the motivation behind it. And if we analyse anyway, if we analyse an ordinary action, it's true. You have to see that the main reason killing is bad when you do it is because you wanted to harm the person. So we can have a third thing, you know. What's your name again?
Marianne.
Marianne has got a mouse, and she doesn't even see it. And she stomps on it, and the poor thing dies in agony. But she doesn't even see it, doesn't even ever know she killed that mouse. And that's happening all the time. We're doing this all the time. Look at all the creatures we're killing. Endlessly. Buddha says there's not an atom of space you won't find sentient beings. Pervading the universe. Everywhere there is existence, there are sentient beings. We're harming them just by breathing. Under our armpits like a zoo, apparently. So we're killing all the time. So there's Marianne in her kitchen, chatting away, cooking lunch for some friends, you know, being all nice. And then she kills a mouse. And it probably died, let's say it even dies a more agonising death than my mouse or her mouse. So from the point of view of the mice, hers suffered most. But she didn't have any intention, did she? Therefore, how can there be karma? If intention is the very meaning of the word karma, the mental karma is the point. Mental intention, mental action, mental karma. The mind runs the show, people. If there is no intention, how can there be karma? Think it logically. We don't like to because we keep thinking, well, she's still bad. There must be some negativity. But analyse it. Okay, there's, again, more nuance than that. We can have very many different situations and very many scenarios. We can have many discussions and many debates. But this is getting it down to see, again, here, not only the real meaning of motivation, which is behind intention, but the actual presence of intention there. in her case, let's say. But there's a mouse, she did the action, physical, stomped on it. Physical action, her foot stood on the mouse, and then the mouse died. No intention. Therefore, there can't be motivation. So you can argue, no karma. There's many examples, many scenarios, many ways of looking, but this is to try to get us to see the point about intention, the meaning of karma itself. So then you go, oh, well, that means that doesn't really matter. I'm an old alcoholic and I'm walking around, I'm a liar and a thief, and I'm walking around, I'm stomping on people everywhere, not realizing I'm doing it, therefore no negative karma. It's more complex than just merely that. Yeah, this unawareness is part of the suffering of how we all are now. We're as thick as posts, we're completely ignorant, we're endlessly harming each other. But we're trying to get here the point of the heaviness of when an action is done by intention, with a motivation, and the complete action, a complete action, a complete action. Of course there's karma, not just complete actions. A complete action is one with all those components that then brings the fruit of future suffering lives. In this case, of virtue brings future positive lives. But there's other kinds of karma too. There's the kind of karma which is like the residual results. One way of saying it, I think, is that the residual results of having done the complete actions in the past, then you complete the karma in the lower realms, the Buddha would say, and then you get born in this life as a human, virtue ripened, to give you a human life. But you've still got the residual result of killing. You continue to kill. You have the residual result of killing. You will get killed. You have the residual result of killing. You'll have the environmental result of killing. Food will harm you. The air is polluted. These are three other ways that karma ripens, which aren't fully ripened results. Or also incomplete actions can bring these types of results. So there's the fully ripened result, which is a type of birth. Here we are, we're human. So we can deduce very clearly for the Buddha that at the time of our past death, not more than a few weeks before conception in our mummy's human womb, we were, our mind was, at the time before we even stopped breathing, pretty much, a virtuous karmic seed from this bank of trillions of seeds in our little mind, from every single action we've done, all the throwing karmas, the complete karmas, a fully ripened result, triggered by the way we died. We can deduce that maybe we died with morality, died with a peaceful mind, died with virtue, from having practiced the spiritual path, probably in the context of keeping vows of morality, Rinpoche says, which at the time before we even stopped breathing, triggered one of these many karmic seeds. It's all a highly complex process that just plays itself out, no one's doing it. The virtuous karmic seed ripened, and then that triggered all the other karmic seeds of our personality, our experiences, and our environment, which I'll go into. All of this was really programmed before we even stopped breathing, the past life. So then we died, and we'll go through the process of death. And then we, in this intermediate state, which is just like a dream state, experientially, psychologically, physiologically, kind of intense, weird experience, no sense of space and time, all the weird things that happen in dreams. And then but the energy that's driving us, and we'll go into this in more detail, is this powerful grasping at for another basis of another I. And then boom, in my case, in about May 1944, because I was born in December and I came out 2 months early, so it would be about May 44, my mum and dad hopped into wherever they hopped and did whatever they did, and the egg and sperm came together, and the new condition ripened, and I saw it, and I ran like a magnet. Zap. Beginning of Robina. Human birth, the result of phenomenal virtue. To have the causes we have to accumulate just to get a human birth, a regular old human body, blow our minds, and we realise how much virtue we'd have to have created just to get that. The conditions of morality, the habit of non-killing, the habit of non-harming, non-killing, non-stealing, especially non-killing. Practice, as Lama Zopa says, in the context of keeping vows of non-killing. Because just being a nice person is not enough, he said. So that was the cause of our getting just the human body. Human birth, that's the first karma. The next one is all your tendencies. The type of person. Well, even say the second one, the third one's first. The next one would be the experiences, the very type of life we go to. In my case, mummy, Teddy and Billy. My mummy, Agnes Bliss. She was called Billy because they wanted a boy, so she got to be known as Billy, but her name was Agnes, and her family name was Bliss. I was called after my auntie, Robina Bliss, Agnes's sister. So there's my mummy, Billy, in bed with my daddy, Teddy. Billy and Teddy are there doing their trip, about May 44. So this is Why, how come I went to their womb as opposed to the womb of their red setter in the backyard? It was no accident. Oops, missed. Not like that. It was very focused, very precise karma. Again, no one running the show, no one determining, no one pulling the strings, no one deciding, no one punishing, no one rewarding. It's a natural law. Highly complex how it works, but it's a natural law. My mind ran to mummy's womb, the human womb, due to morality. Powerful karma of morality, just that. But also, interestingly, as it's described in the 12 links of dependent origination, the 8th and 9th link, craving and grasping, they play a role in our daily life. They're just extra strong levels of attachment that are playing out every single second, keeping the wheel of samsara going. But they play a very powerful role at the time of death. So as Lama Zopa says, not only do we need the morality, it gives us a decent life, but the huge generosity that gives us a life where we can have things, and I'll talk about this in a minute. We also need, at the time of death, this craving and grasping play a massive role. This grasping is really intense, and we have to grasp at that next life. So if we're practicing being Buddhists and we're having confidence in karma and the future lives, we have to want to practice virtue and have to want a decent human life. So you've got to, at the time of death, that grasping will rise. So by training your mind through your life, that grasping, which will come anyway until you realise emptiness and get out of samsara, whatever exact point that happens, this grasping has to be at the next future life. If you're a Christian, it'll be in heaven, And then your virtue causes it, but the grasping kind of gets you there because you're still in the wheel of life, still in samsara. So morality is the cause of this getting into the body. The second kind of karma is called experiences similar to the cause. Experiences similar to the cause. Hear the words. Pretty clear. So this means the very life we're born into, the type of mummy and daddy we have. My siblings, my friends, next door neighbours, the people in my country, the politics, enemies, friends, terrorists, rapists, kind people, ugly people, the nuns who taught me at school, all the people, the sentient beings whom you have a karmic connection with, your kind of the context in which you're born, all the sentient beings. That's called experiences similar to the cause, and therefore how they treat you. How they treat you. So of course we only ever ask the question, why do bad things happen to people? We never ask the question, why do good things happen to people? But this is these two here. Your experiences. So if you are brought up in a fairly loving family, okay, people are normal with delusions, and daddy doesn't rape you every day, we just go, we take that for granted, yeah, I've got a good father, because fathers should be good, and they better be good because they're going to be good to me. But if they start raping you, why do bad things happen to me? Well, the good things happen to you for the same reason as the bad things happen to you. The result of your own past actions. Very logical for the Buddha. Equal status. Weeds and flowers both have seeds, baby. And weeds and flowers in your garden are your garden. You're responsible for both. You can't just say, oh, the flowers are mine. No, the weeds, nothing to do with me. No, I didn't put them in there. No, it's not my fault. Which is how we do, like babies. So the experiences, from the second you're born till the second you die, because we are social creatures, aren't we? We all act out with each other, don't we? We all live in social environments where we have creatures, sentient beings, humans, dogs, rats, mice, cockroaches. Well, honey, they're your cockroaches. They're your mice. That's your rapist. That's your beloved mother. That's your beloved husband. That's your kind Catholic nun. Whether people are kind to you or not, give you or steal from you, hate you or love you, believe you or not believe you, all that's called experiences similar to the cause. It's everything in our lives. This is, again, a simple statement, but so shocking we can't hear it. Because why? Because we're totally convinced, believe in the view of the innocent victim, which is the view that I didn't ask to get born, that it's not my fault. Someone else put me here. And then bringing strong attachment and aversion, and because we've got the junky mind of attachment that only wants good things, we make the wrong assumption that therefore I deserve good things, and we then don't want bad things, so we have the wrong assumption that I don't deserve bad things. No logical basis for those thoughts at all. It's a question of the karma you created. So we have to unpack it all. It doesn't come so easily. It takes time to unpack all this, applying Buddha's philosophical view to our life, which is what you do if you call yourself a Buddhist. If you call yourself a musician and you never play piano, well, please be truthful. You're not a musician. Well, if you are a Buddhist, it's not enough to say you're a Buddhist. Oh, I like Buddha. You got to know what he says. Because that's how you be a Buddhist, by applying the thoughts in your daily life to interpret your daily life. This is how you apply karma. This is Buddhist philosophy, if you say you're a Buddhist. It takes time. The third kind of karma is called, or third or second, doesn't matter what order, is called actions similar to the cause. Actions here is another word for karma, which is broadly speaking whatever you do. So here it's referring to whatever you do or think or say. Obviously based upon what you think. Your actions similar to the cause. The actions that you do, mental, physical and verbal, that you do. Motivated obviously by the mental. So it means your tendencies, your characteristics, your personality traits, whether you're Hitler or Mother Teresa or somewhere in between. Every one of those is a tendency in your mind, and where did it come from is not rocket science. From having done it before. It's like a can't believe it. That's all. Why do you play piano well, Robina? Well, guess what, dear? I did practice yesterday. Hardly rocket science. And what caused you to practice yesterday? Well, I was practicing the day before. And why did you practice the day before? Well, I did it the day before. And where did that come from? A tendency. That such that when you see a piano, you run to it. And you can put your hands on it and go quite easily. That's because you've done it before this life. You brought it with you. We come programmed from the first second of conception, Buddha says, with all our tendencies, with all these four types. The human ones come with the experiences and the tendencies. They're all there programmed, right from the first second of conception in the mind. Mummy and Daddy have nothing to do with it. Okay, that's an extreme statement. They have a lot to do with it. But then it's not either nurture or nature, which is how we tend to think. Is it nurture or is it nature? We can't work it out. It's both, for God's sake. But the fundamental one is nature. You come from before. Not in the self-existent sense that the materialists talk about it. This is a bunch of habits. A bunch of habits. That's all. It's very spacious when you think of it this way. And we know that's spacious because we know you can change a habit. But if you think it's set in stone, which is what we think, which is the view of self-existence, it is who I am, that's why we kill ourselves. This is me, I'm evil. I'm hopeless, no good. That's set in stone is a good way of saying seeing something as self-existent. Not dependent arising. It's just a dependent arising. You want to torture because guess what, baby, you've tortured before. You want to play piano because you played piano before. You want to be compassionate because you've been compassionate before. You've got the tendency in your mind, you've programmed yourself. We each come with our own programming. It's a simple way to put it. We are the ones. Not mummies and daddies' DNA and grandpas and grandpas and great-grandpas when we keep looking for it. Not like that. We might be similar to mummy and daddy. That's because they've done it before as well. And that's what drew us together. That's why, fascist parents have fascist babies. Not always. But we can see they do, Mummy and Daddy didn't teach them to be fascist. They did. But if the child didn't have fascist tendencies, it would have been water off a duck's back. So the conditions are huge. The conditions play a major role. But the simple thing is, if we think of the analogy of a seed being the main cause of the fruit, which is true, we know that. The apple seed is the main cause of the apple tree. But you can hold it up here for 27 years, you won't get an apple tree. Why? Because you need the conditions. The water, the soil, the sun, the time. Well, the same here. The seed of my mind, my characteristics is my own past habit. But my mummy's teaching me music triggered my potential for music. My daddy's punching me in the nose triggered my tendency for anger. The actions out there, which we think are the cause of why I am, are merely the secondary cause or the catalyst. Catalyst is a better word. Just to think it through, that's all. And all of this, what does it bring? Massive accountability. Massive grown up. I'm the boss. I'm responsible. It's the opposite to victim. The opposite to blame. The opposite to guilt. It's accountability. What can I do about it? This is the point of karma. This is what it brings experientially, if we apply it carefully, step by step. It makes us grow up. It's huge. not quite finished, just a second. Fourth way in a minute. Fourth way karma ripens. Interesting, it's called environmental karma. The very way the external physical world impacts upon us. Environment doesn't just mean the moon and the stars and the nature, you know, it means everything. Maybe you're born, let's say you're born as a human, really good human body, to very nice mummy and daddy, so you've got good throwing karma, nice mummy and daddy, nice siblings, you know, lovely people at school, but you're really poor, living in a stinky, rotten, smelly house in the corner where the wind comes freezing in the winter and the sun comes shining and boiling in the summer. Well, human birth, result of morality. Good mummy and daddy, result of morality. That's the experience is similar to the cause. Good tendencies, all the morality. Environmental karma, lousy. The physical world that's meant to nourish and nurture you harms you. That's due to your karma, no accident. So the way to put that here, we either think, if we're Christian, God is the creator, is the architect of the universe. We even call it act of God, don't we? When naughty things happen, we call it an act of God, blaming God for the bad things, excuse me. Or we call it Mother Nature. I never know who she is, but we call her Mother Nature did it, you know, it's an easy answer to things. Well, even the environment, and then you've got the materialist view, which is just the physical world. So the Buddha's view, again, more nuanced. There is a physical world. And the Buddha's view is it's made of the 4 elements. This is like Galileo and that mob back in the Middle Ages said. That's the view they had then. They've got 1 million elements. It's 4 elements, earth, air, fire, water. And the 4 elements, so the entire physical, the world as we know it is made up of minds, trillions and trillions of mind streams, mental continuums, continuities of rivers of mental moments, mind streams, minds. And then there is matter, which is the 4 elements. And both are beginningless. Both are the product of this cause and effect process. This comes from this, which comes from this, which comes from this. And if you track back all the way, just even the cause of a cup, you'd get back to the first moment of this universe. You'd have to. And then you've got to go, what came before that? Well, previous elements. Because the wind element, the subtlest of the 4 subsumed down to the wind element when all the physical things collapse, including this body, which we'll talk about in the death process. And that wind element is just the result of a build-up of the previous, because it's got the components of all the 4 elements in it. So this is beginningless as well. As His Holiness said one time, you know, I'm paraphrasing here. Big Bang, no problems. Just not the first Big Bang, that's all. So the 4 elements are beginningless. And so are minds. This is so mind-blowing, because why it's mind-blowing, again, it's really simple, the thought. A 5-year-old could say it. Minds are beginningless. Matter is beginningless. But because it's not what we think or believe in now, it attacks us and we can't think it through. So we have to think it through, logically. So however the environment, even you could say, let's say, due to, and we'll go through this, the listing. Can I have one of those copies of the things, please, sweetheart? Sharon, thank you. In this, let's go through it now. Any questions first? Okay, let's go into more detail. Questions first. Oh, I made a mistake on here, look at me. Kurukulla Center for Tibetan Buddhist Studies Center. Oh. Sorry about that. Okay, so here, on page 15, the 10 non-virtues and their results. This is coming from an old teachings of Lama Zopa's, page 15. We'll go through that in a minute, but we want to ask questions first, okay? Questions, people? Questions? You had a question, darling, yeah.
I guess I just want to make sure I understand this. So karma impacts everything, and so in the...
What was that first sentence?
Karma impacts everything.
Okay, why don't you spell that out just a bit so we make sure we're all communicating. What do you mean by that?
I think the second half will clarify. All I wanted to make sure I understood was that you're going to come with tendencies programmed, but then the conditions that you live in and how they ripen those tendencies also come from your karma.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
How come you meet those parents, those conditions, beauty, ugly, rich, poor, war zone, peace, all of this, absolutely. Okay. As Lama Zopa puts it, a nice cosmic way of saying it, everything in each being's lives is our own karmic appearance. We meet. First of all, you think about it, think about humans, sentient beings. We all We know we're social creatures. We all live in reference to others, don't we? We're all these separate little eyes all trying to get on, or not getting on, as the case may be. Mostly not. Friends, enemies and strangers, isn't it? So we're always in relationship with others. And it's humans, creatures, cockroaches, rats, the pets, you know. We're acting out our lives in reference to many, many others. So depending on how one of the ways that karma ripens is the way those others treat us. So we can see some people I know in prison, they've just, since the time they're born, they've been abused, attacked, insulted, harmed. All they have here is rough speech. All they have is poverty. All they have is drugs. They've done this. So it's like they could be the sweetest people in their mind. So they've got really powerful, virtuous imprints. But they've got the lousiest experiences similar to the cause. You understand? And environmental karma, those two. You understand? A person, we can see, some people live in the best houses, the most beautiful things with the most divine bodies, but they've got the lousiest, most rotten minds, full of delusion and cheating and lying and rapists and drug addicts and suffering intensely internally. Isn't it? We can see this all the time. So the 4 tracks of karma, if you like, put it simply, the type of birth you get in the first place, the tendencies in your mind, the experiences you have in relation to others, and then added to that, another aspect of that, but a separate one, is the environment. So for example, a person due to a lot of... Well, okay, let's go through them. We'll go through them here. We'll just go through them very briefly. So anybody have any other questions? Yes?
I just want to... I have a question about the example of Marianne stepping on the mouse and not knowing it.
Yeah.
And it being experiences similar to the cause.
Sorry.
Is that an example of being experiences similar to the
What
cause?
is, for whom? Her or the mouse?
For Marianne.
No. Marianne's experience is similar to the cause is what happens to Marianne. That's Marianne doing something.
Okay.
That's different.
So my question is, say she doesn't know it happened, and then someone points out to her. Say someone points out to her that she killed a mouse.
Right.
And her attention was never there.
That's right.
Is there an imprint of her reaction?
Of course, because that's when the mind is... Whenever your mind is doing something, which actually is most of the time, we're constantly imprinting, constantly programming. So that, you see, let's say she hates mouse even more than I do, and then she discovers she didn't know she killed it. She could rejoice even more powerfully. I'm so glad I killed the mouse. Okay. Well, then even heavier negative.
Right, that's what I was going to ask.
That rejoicing in someone else's death is like practically worse than killing, you know.
So every time you have a memory of something,
it's up to what you do with it.
Right,
it's how you do it. Everything is what you do with your mind. And this is where when we come to start to want to practice, we get a bit scared. We think, I shouldn't be killed, I shouldn't be angry, I shouldn't get jealous, I shouldn't have sexual fantasies. Then we start having them, we panic, you know. But there's different things. Like, for example, let's say you're my therapist. And she's my worst enemy. And I hate her, but I'm struggling to practice with my mind. I come to you crying about what she did, but I'm really trying to work on my mind. That's not bad, that's good. Right. But if I come to you and just reinforce what a creep she is, then that's bad. It's up to what you do with what arises. That's why we shouldn't be scared of what arises. We should be seeing it for what it is, but then want to try and change it. Right. Not be scared of it, because it's just old imprints coming up crazily, you know. Okay. That's not so easy either. No. Do you see my point?
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Catherine?
Maybe a silly question, but I'm trying to visualize how insects, mice, animals get to take human reproduction.
I understand. We'll go into that when I go to the death process.
Cool.
I'll go into that. Great. Okay, let's go through roughly here. 11 o'clock, 10, 11. 12:30 is lunch. So maybe about 20 past 11 we'll have a bit of a break, yeah? Tea break or something, a quick break, and then 12:30. Okay, so let's go through these roughly. Like I said, there are 4 ways, one way of dividing. Sometimes it's done differently in the text. But there are 4 ways, 4 tracks of karma. It's a simple way to put it. 4 ways in which your past actions can ripen in the present. Okay? So, in the first level of practice, kind of the first scope in the Lam Ring or junior school, as I like to call it, Buddha exhorts us to simply refrain from doing the 10 non-virtues. He's got this like 10 little bullet points, 10 don'ts. Not complicated, just 10. Like I said, if you had to learn to drive a car, you wrote it all down, you have 100 don'ts. This is only 10. The first 7 are about your body and speech, and the last 3 are about the mind. So the first 3 are about the body. He suggests we don't kill, don't steal, and don't, cheat on our partners. Using our body based on sexual desire, harming others. So 3 of your bodies. Merely refrain from doing these. Again, how do you define these actions? They're called negative because they harm others. Why not do them? Because they're going to harm you. Why? Because your motivation is always what's behind it. Why you kill is because you have aversion or attachment. Why you jump on other people's partners is because you have a huge attachment. Why you steal is because you have attachment. So it's the motivation behind it we can see is what causes it to be negative. We can see that. And there's 4 of the speech, which is surely for humans. We mightn't go around raping and killing too many people, but hey, we do bucket loads of harm with our speech. So we say things that aren't true. We say things that are harsh. We say things about bad things about people behind their backs, which causes so much disharmony. And we just rabbit on about nothing. Idle talk, as they politely call it. Okay? So each of these 7 so far, can have any or all of the 4 results, right? So obviously, the fully ripened result of any one of these would be bringing a lower realm rebirth. That's going to be the same. Obviously, the variations of the type of rebirth, but that's not the discussion here. So that'll always be a lower realm rebirth, the first kind. The second kind is obvious. The tendency, one of the things that killing can manifest as is the tendency to keep killing. Lying will manifest as the tendency to keep lying. Stealing will manifest as the tendency to keep stealing. Do you understand? It's obvious, isn't it? The tendency is the same karma every time. There's the tendency to keep doing that one. So what's different for each of these 7 is the experience and the environmental. You with me, people? Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go through those then. They're all here, page 15. Just very brief. So killing, the experience similar to the cause of killing, meaning what will happen to you, is one of the residual results of having killed. When I think also it's the result of not a complete action of killing. It'll ripen as a type of experience that you will have, which means one of them will be that you will get killed. Look at the world. Look at the world. People get killed all the time, don't they? The other one, similar to killing, is that you might die young. You might die young. The main cause of our being still alive, whether we're 5 or 95, is morality karma, non-killing karma. Non-killing karma is the main cause of having a long life and a healthy life. Look at Warren Buffett, 86, 87, and his daughter said she's never seen water pass his lips. He lives on hamburgers and ice cream and Coca-Cola. And he had prostate cancer recently, I think, but he's as fit as a fiddle otherwise. Well, the Buddhist view would be that's the result of a lot of morality karma, non-killing in the past, is the main cause of his having a fat, healthy body now and having a long life. You with me, people? Mm-hmm. The other way that your killing karma can ripen as an experience would be that you get sick easily. I mean, this really mostly, I'd say, you're sick easily and have a little energy, Die young. And look, people die young all the time. As we say, quote unquote, no medical reason. We can't work it out why. Of course, this is Buddha's view, because you didn't have enough non-killing, virtuous karmic gas in your tank, basically, and it ran out, and you just dropped dead. 17-year-olds drop dead on the basketball court. Babies die, just like that. No medical cause. I bet you more humans who have the karma to be going to a human womb, winning the lottery and getting a human womb in the first place, at conception, die before they're even born than those who get born. I bet if you did the numbers. Miscarriages and abortions. All of those are the result of the experience similar to the cause of having killed in the past. Remember, not punishment. No one's doing it to you. It's a natural law. It's inbuilt in the very energy of doing these things that brings those results. So you can imply the opposite. Like I said, long life, healthy body, not getting killed. That's the fruit of the opposite of killing. Conscious, intentional, non-killing, probably, as Rinpoche points out, not just being a good, it's not enough, but consciously, intentionally non-killing in the context of having a vow of non-killing. We talked last night and we'll talk about more in detail. The environmental result, it's obvious. Food, drink, medicine, crops are scarce, always inferior, low in nutrition or potency, hard to digest, cause disease. And also you could be living in an environment where other people are dying off. You could be living where there's a lot of sick people, or where people are dying all the time. That's the environmental result for you. It's the experience similar to the cause for them, but it's your environmental result, that you're around people who are all dropping dead, Do you understand? The environmental result. So we create the cause to be born in nice places, ugly places, beautiful places, harmonious, war zones, etc., etc. It is that what it is. The elements are doing that. People are dying off, that's their karma. But the fact that we're born there, into that family, into that country, into that place, that's the aspect of our karma of it. Stealing, taking things that aren't offered to you. The experience, similar to the cause, is interesting. You never have enough to live on. You can never make ends meet. You can see mega rich people have this one. They're always, they're falling into debt. They lose their money. They get another million. They never get, the money comes at the wrong time. They can't pay their debts. They lose their house. They get another one. They get rich again, but they keep losing it. Other people who can be poor, always money's there at the right time. Never have to worry. That's the fruit of non-stealing. The other one is the result of stealing. So all these actions, they sort of have this natural capacity to activate or block things. It's just like, you can think about it psychologically. Again, it's not punishment. It's not reward. No one's up there pulling the strings. Also, it's interesting. You see, also experience, I don't know why it doesn't say it here. I don't know why I didn't put it. Surely, being stolen from has to be a direct result too. Being stolen from has to be the result of stealing. Obvious. The environmental result, crops are few and far between. No power to remove hunger. They spoil, never come up. Dry spells stay on too long. Rains too much. Crops dry up. Look at all the imbalance of the way the world is with the environment, Floods 1 minute, fires the next minute, never comes at the right time, That's Buddha's explanation for why. Of course, the conditions daily, what people do to the world, that's the external condition that activates this, but the fundamental cause is the past karma of the beings who live there together. So sexual misconduct is interpreted in various ways in the Buddhist teachings, but the most basic way to interpret it is in terms of having strong attachment and then cheating on partners. Because in the world we have relationships, don't we? We have these monogamous relationships. It depends. Maybe you don't have maybe you've got polygamy, but you still cheat. You still cheat. It means going behind someone's back and cheating. We can hear that energy. This is the main way of describing sexual misconduct here. But in terms of the results, there's two ways of describing. So the first one is the experience is the one of cheating on people, and you can hear the result. That people who work around you, anybody, as unreliable. You find yourself always having a lot of competition for your partner. And all of your relationships, they don't last. People die on you, they leave you. Not just the sexual ones. You can hear it somehow. Do you understand? But the other one, the environmental result, is more related to the attachment energy. Look at anybody who's really attached to sex. Look at the poor old pedophiles, You just by looking at their poor old faces, you can see that their minds are really unpleasant, unhappy minds, just thinking 24 hours a day of having sex with babies and things. You understand? Their faces just give them away. Look at it. You understand what I'm saying? Overwhelmed by sexual attachment. It must be a nightmare. That energy. Well, listen to the environmental result. You live in a place where there's urine and feces all around, and mud and dirt and filth, and everything stinks, and everywhere seems unpleasant and distasteful. We know environments like that. Some people have that environment in their own house, in a beautiful suburb, but their house is like this. It's their own personal karma, And you can see, this is where it's interesting, when you see someone else's house, let's say, and it's all mucky and dirty and smelly, you think, why can't they see it? Why don't they fix it? Do you understand? But when the karma's really strong, you feel kind of, you're like you're drowning in it. If you've got really problems with money, let's say, there's good accountants out there every day, there's good bookkeepers around, but no matter what you do, you never get your books clear. It's always a mess, it's always obstacles, like walking through mud. That's when the karma's very strong. Do you understand what I'm saying? When the tendency is so strong, the result is so strong, you just can't get out of it, It's like that. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay. Now we have verbal actions. Lying. The experience, similar to the cause, is so clear it's like a joke. That no one believes what you're saying, even if you're telling the truth. Don't we all have that experience? It's like a nightmare. You can't believe what's happening. You know, you just can't believe it. People just don't believe you. It's like a hell. The most terrible suffering can come from this one. That's from your past lying. And equally the opposite. I had this as a kid. I remember being a smarty pants at school and I gave an answer and I knew I was lying in my answer. But people believed me. And that was the fruit of past truth-telling. Even when I spoke a lie, people believed me. Do you understand? I had that in this country when I first came, and I think because it's public, I shouldn't be saying this. I'm going to get caught one day, I tell you. At some point, years, this is a long time ago, I forget which country. I lived in a country. I went to one country where I said when I lived there for a year without a visa, I said I was a citizen. I said I had all the right papers and things, and I didn't, but everyone believed that I did. They believed me, even when I was telling a lie. Do you understand? But I remember as a little girl, when this happened, when people believed me, I thought to myself, wow, I better be careful with my speech if people believe me when I'm telling a lie, you know. So, the environmental result, you listen to it. It makes sense. Your work in cooperation with others always fails to prosper. People don't work well together. Everybody generally is cheating one another and is afraid, and there are many things to be afraid of. This is so familiar. And you can see how karma changes. Like in a relationship, at work, let's say, everyone's harmonious, you begin off, you're partners, you love each other to death, and within a year, this. So this karma between people. Look at relationships. You begin loving each other, and a year later you want to kill each other. The karma is all there to have both, with those same people. You can see it. Divisive talk, which is something that actually we don't realise we do, but if you think of what we do all the time, especially when the person isn't there. So what we do about politicians, other people, people at work, members of the family, our own sisters and brothers and husbands and wives to other people, we complain, we criticise them. It's one of our worst mistakes. And even when it comes to politicians, we practically think it's virtuous to really complain and criticise. There can be construction. There can be constructive criticism. As Martin Luther King said, it's all right to find fault. But then you say, what do I do about it? Not just moan and complain. So this one, I really think with the speech, with us humans, and we control our speech, we transform our own minds. Because every time you say bad words, you're upsetting your own mind, aren't you? You're increasing your anger. It's obvious. No wonder you can't meditate. No wonder why you can't calm your mind down. Well, you keep feeding the negativity with your bad speech, you know. So we've got to watch our speech like a hawk, and it's so hard because it usually just vomits out. Isn't it? Divisive talk. The experience, similar to the cause, is you easily lose friends. People around you are always fighting one another, and people around you have an undesirable character. We can see this all the time. And then we have the experience. Yeah, that's it. That's the experience similar to the cause. And the environmental result, it's always to do with the actual, what grows, you know, it's interesting. The ground where you live is like broken things and thorns and stones and sharp broken glass. It's rough and dreary, and there are no streams or lakes or water springs, and the earth is parched and poisoned and burning hot and useless and threatening in a place where there are many things to fear. It seems to be speech. It seems to cause this, you know. Look at the world. When we keep thinking of the opposite and we compare our lives, ordinary, humble, you know, not very rich lives, we can see we're like living in paradise. A reasonably clean house, reasonably pleasant friends, people reasonably believe us, they're not stealing from us. Do you understand? Money comes when we need it, which we just take for granted. We think, oh, aren't I lucky? Or we think, oh, aren't I blessed? The universe blesses me. No, you worked hard in the past. At lying, no killing, no stealing. You should be in bliss every day at how hard you worked in the past. There's no reason to be depressed when you think like this. But we take it for granted. We don't notice it. Because we're so dissatisfied, we always just see the bad. I mean, it's heartbreaking. Our ordinary life, our ordinary reasonable life should be enough to make us in bliss every day. It's not accidental. We're not living in a war zone, or where the latest terrorism is, or the wars, or the violence, or the fires. We're not homeless. You know, it's not accidental. It's not just luck. It's the result of our own past virtue, which if we use the view of karma, it blisses you out every day, and of course what it does is encourage you to keep doing it. If you see your beautiful garden, all the lovely flowers and veggies, and every day you just go, oh, aren't I lucky? It's superstition, isn't it? You're not lucky, you bloody worked hard. And because you know it's the product of your hard work, you will not waste them. You see my point? We have to remember, because we're not used to thinking this. We just think it's good luck, and it's bad luck, or it's God, or it's somebody else. I'm not being rude. If you have faith in God, please practice gratitude to God every day. Same result will come. But here we're not discussing God, Creator. The fourth one, idle talk, which is just, I call it rabbiting on about nothing. Just this impulse to talk, compulsion to go blah, you know, which we all have. You listen to this one, the experience is so obvious, it's a joke. The experience, similar to the cause. No one pays any attention to what you say. It's so obvious. It's just so embarrassingly obvious. Even we can see it now in this life. I mean, this is from past lives. And this would mean when you're born, and I would suggest in a typical world, this is being born a girl. Hear my point. We're all being born girls and boys 20,000 lives, so it's not personal. One of the karmas of being female, okay, things are changing in lives, you know, you can see things are changing. One of the karma of being female, the classic one, is you look at some worlds, still some cultures. Not only are you're not listened to, you're not even allowed to be seen. You know? Think of the karma of that person. And if you open your mouth, it's like a sound, it's like the air, you know, so that's sort of the wind in the air on the leaves. It has no weight, no power, no one's going to listen. But in our ordinary lives, forget, you know, male or female, we can see this one strongly. You feel like no one listens to you, no one hears your words. This is because of past rabbiting on about nothing, because your words are cheap now, you know. We can even see it in this life, people who don't speak much, and then when they do, people listen. Because their words are sort of more precious. You can hear it. All of these are mainly the result from past lives, not this life. Karmic seeds ripen, they take time between the seed and the fruit, obviously, and it's usually what you do in what is happening. So what we are in this life is the fruit of what we've done in the past. And what we do in this life will be causing the fruit in the future. Often they have a saying, if you want to know what you did in the past, look at who you are now. Check your life. You know, people treat you nicely, money in the bank, good health, those things. Or indeed the opposite. You can tell what you did in the past. Look what you do now. You can tell yourself what you'll be in the future. If you lie, steal, kill, blah, 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 you can deduce your future. So it's learning to see it in this more objective way, rather than just everything's all based on my experience now, you know. Break. So the environmental result, again, this is idle talk, fruits don't grow at the wrong time, seem ripe when they're not, have frail roots and no leisure places, blah, 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 same thing, and many things to make you afraid. Harsh speech is very simple. The experience is similar to the causes. You will always be hearing distressing words. Many of my friends in prison, that's all they've known all their lives. One guy, just a normal person who only ever hear distressing words, he went to the dentist. They took him out of the prison to go to the dentist one day, under guard and everything, you know, and the nurse simply said to him, "How are you today?" And he burst into tears. Just hearing those words, "How are you today?" Wasn't used to it. Can you imagine? This is from harsh speech, sort of obvious. And the environmental result's really simple. You'll be born in a desert. Nothing will grow. It seems to sort of, harsh speech is the most intensive speech. It's one of my worst ones, I'd be careful. Nothing grows. Nothing can grow. You're born in a desert, you know. You're born in a desert and all you hear is distressing sounds. That's the result of heartbeat, okay? And the last three, okay, these 10 little checklist of don'ts that Buddha exhorts us to do to turn into a better person for our sake, are the mind, about the mind. And the way I've put it is this. This is my way of saying it, okay? He doesn't really get into the mind, to the delusions, to the root causes of all problems until this middle scope of practice in high school. So here, my way of saying this is just the beginnings of working on your mind. And so these three are the three root delusions. In Buddha's model of the mind, you've got these different groupings of these neuroses, delusions, and this is the three root delusions. The main one of all is this one called ignorance. And I'll go through these three. Okay, these three here. Craving or coveting, you could hear it, is an extra strong level of attachment, isn't it? You know, you can have sort of a neediness for something. You can think about it and want it and get all excited. But the really strong level of that is you just can't let it go, and then you see other people's beautiful things and you crave to have them. It's like a junkie, basically. It's a stronger level of attachment. Stronger level of attachment, like a bottomless pit. Very, very intense suffering, isn't it? So the consequences of that in our life, or next life, will bring you the experience of that your personality will be dominated. Well, that seems to be more your tendencies, you know. You'll be dominated by attachment, by dissatisfaction, which is the energy of attachment. That's the one. And look at us. This seems to be had this in our culture. The irony is we're like in the 1% of the world in terms of just having reasonable lives. But our level of dissatisfaction is stupendous. And this is the fruit of practicing strong craving and grasping in the past. Such in this life, we're just born as bottomless pits of dissatisfaction. Always dissatisfied. It's very, very distressing. You can hear it. And then the environmental result, you know, good, nice things get worse easily. Fade and get ugly and broken very quickly. Do you understand? And then ill will is just an extra strong level of anger. You hear it, it's quite intense. When you can be angry, in 5 minutes you let go. But when you never give up. You know, I'm reading the biography of Frank Sinatra at the moment. I like reading biographies. Poor old Frank. I love him. He's an amazing singer. But he seemed to have this quality. It's not fair to talk about him, but 30 years later, still raging angry at Tommy Dorsey, who hired him when he was a young singer, and then who wanted money to get out of his contract. 30 years later, even at one concert, saying, can you hear me, Tommy? Angry, ill will, angry with him still, not letting go, bitter, angry, and then actually wanting the person to suffer. So that would be total torture, wouldn't it? That's, you look at why people harm each other. You get angry and then you can't let it go and eventually you actually kill the person. That's ill will, the consequences. You can't let it go. Really heavy level of anger. It's terrible. Nightmare. Hell. So, of course, your personality is dominated by anger. And of course, you always find yourself without, this is the experience, always find yourself without help. And this can even be, keep remembering, this is not the result of having it now. You'll be dominated by anger, but you can also see people have the other result. They can be quite peaceful people, where they've got the result of past anger, past ill will. You always find yourself without help, or never find the help you need. You're always hurting, okay, that's a different one. But never finding help when you need it. But you can be quite sweet. It's possible to have that. You see some people, that's the fruit of past bitter anger, you know. Because you cut people off. They don't mention it here, but you think of paranoia, feeling, you know, separate from other people, not liking other people, imagining them harming you, feeling very stressed by other people. That's the result of harming others in the past, actually. That's a bit different here, but that's the result of anger and harming others. That you perceive harm from them, and you don't like groups of people, you want to keep away from ugly people. That's reminded me of that. So, environmental result of ill will. You live in a world of chaos. It's obvious. Disease is everywhere, evil is everywhere, plague, conflict, war, fear of your countries and others' military, dangerous animals, they're surrounded by harmful spirits, thieves and muggers and the like. Look at the world. Yeah. And then wrong views is a term they use for a consequence of this ignorance, which is the root delusion of not seeing how things truly exist. And the grosser aspect of it is this kind of very narrow-minded, fundamentalist, eye for an eye, racist, you understand? Fundamentalist kind of mind. And we don't have to be having a philosophy to have this. Just look at your ordinary people. Narrow-minded, very ignorant, very fixed in your views. You're wrong, I'm right, and very superstitious. That's the result of this one. You're wrong. And the experience is you're always dominated by and also you're thick as a post. Dominated by stupidity. The result of past life, which means a very superstitious mind, a very ignorant mind. You know, I looked recently, just saw that movie, The Butler, the one that's on now, or it's been on recently. You saw that? You know the one I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. And you can see the racist, just an example. Unbelievably superstitious minds, hysterically superstitious minds, and full of rage as well. So the anger was there, but also the ignorance, incredible ignorance. You can see it. And it's not just Americans, it's anywhere in the world. Your next door neighbour can be like that. Narrow-minded, fixed in their views, and therefore so much fear, because fear is beneath all of these, it's obvious. Environmental result, we're even, every time I say this one I get confused what Rinpoche means by it, if I'm quoting Rinpoche here. You live in a world where the single highest source of happiness is steadily disappearing from the earth, and where people think that unclean and suffering things are actually nice. So then meaning the superstitious ignorant mind thinks nice, ugly things are nice, Ignorance, just ignorance. I can't quite get this one. Where you have no place to go and no one to help you and nothing to protect you. That we know, my God. So we look at the world, we can see every single one of these experiences. We can look at the external world and see the physical, the external causes. Could be poverty, we can say that. Could be no medical care, could say that. We can say mean people, we can say that. All of this is not wrong. But for the Buddha, that's only the external cause, the catalyst. Why you're there in the first place, why you have it in the first place, why you're born with it in the first place. That's the main cause. Your past actions. Your past actions. Your past actions. It's quite a shocking, outrageous view, actually. And remember, we're including all the happiness as well. Every good thing. Same. So it's really hard to think of this because it's not how we instinctively think now. Why? Like I said, it's because you're taught this. We have this view of self-existence, not fair, poor me, innocent victim, blah, 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 from the time we're conceived. It's a function of ignorance to think that everything comes from out there. It appears to come from out there. You feel like an innocent victim. I don't have to teach you that you're an innocent victim. This is the energy of ego itself. So we have a tea break, quick tea break. Lunch is in 40, 50 minutes, You want a break now?
Yeah.
Good? Okay, 10-minute break. It's a quickie break and come back. Okay, see you in a minute.
Did you survive the holiday? Good. Yeah. I know. Me too. Yeah. Oh, good.
Is that what we've talked so far? Yeah. Mary.
So I missed a talk that I think that would have helped.
Indeed.
But it's easy to see how some people. Oh, okay. Me. It would be easy for me to look at other people who are suffering.
Is it to what?
To look at other people's sufferings in a dispassionate way.
Yeah.
Does the compassion of a person to another help their karma? Like a suffering person's karma. Does that, would say for instance, my seeing somebody who's suffering, and let's say, given what you've been talking about, that it's because they stole. Does my compassion towards them, it helps my karma, does it help them?
You mean, are you sitting in your house thinking about them, or are you in front of them? It depends on the situation. I
Well,
mean,
let's say I see well, I'm a teacher. Let's say I work with a student who has had repeated issues with
Right.
stealing, and I take that on as something that I'm working on with them.
you mean you're helping them?
Yes.
So you mean to helping people help them?
Yes.
Yes, helping people helps people. I mean,
No, but
I
does
don't.
No, I know that.
Well, of course,
yeah.
no, listen, it's obvious, it's, okay, I hear your point clearly. You sitting there having compassion for others has nothing to do with them, you will grow from that, that's fantastic.
Right.
But then out of this compassion, the next step will be that you will say, how can I help them?
Right.
And that is where you start to help others. So obviously, the key factor in whether or not they change their karma based upon your advice is whether they listen to your advice. Now, you know, it's up to the person. So you have to want to help somebody else, which is coming from compassion. And that comes from you having compassion for yourself first. Then you realise that they're suffering just like you are because of their past karma. And then, of course, your wisdom will help them. Well, your wisdom will inform your ability to help them, won't it?
Mm.
So that means you have to know their mind enough. You have to know how to help them so that you can help them help themselves. So your help is what helps them. And what makes them change is them doing it themselves. But obviously we all respond to help, don't we?
Mm.
Do you see what I'm saying?
I do.
They have to change. They've got to make a decision to change. But you could be the catalyst. And we look into our lives, we can see that every day we hear things from other people can help us change. We say, oh, it changed my life hearing those words. So right there, that person just helped us. But we did the changing. Because we're all responding to conditions, aren't we? All the time. And that's what compassion is. The wish to want to help others based upon wisdom. And this is what we're going to get to through these 4 steps. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm struggling with this concept of having compassion for others, but also then having compassion for me sometimes will mean actually causing suffering for myself. So feeling badly for someone or feeling compassion for, in the kind of Western sense of being with that person, sharing with that pain that they're going through. Mm-hmm. So there's this action of actually creating suffering sometimes for myself.
By doing what?
By feeling compassion.
Oh,
and
okay.
I feel like that's a misunderstanding of what the
suffering
Tibetan
is.
sense
It is. So this is what we're going to be discussing here. This very first step we're talking about, which we're unpacking, we're still in the first step of regret. We're here looking at what a negative action is, and the components that make an action we do that's negative, and then what it is when we do it that causes us to have future suffering. And we're looking at the 4 ways that our karma can ripen, which is these 4, right? So when we have this understanding for ourself, then we can have renunciation, which is I'm sick of suffering, I'm going to change, which is like having compassion for yourself. First step. Then the second step we're going to get to in a minute is where we now have compassion for those we've harmed. Now we're getting to your point. What is meant by suffering, if we look at the Buddha's 4 Noble Truths, it's got nothing to do with feeling sad or having compassion for others. That's called compassion. But if we do suffer as a result, suffer is neurotic. Suffering here is only what Buddha means by the results of negativity. So having compassion for others, where it means tears, is not necessarily suffering. But it usually is for us because we've got attachment and we don't like what we're seeing and we get upset. That's what the suffering is, because we don't like what we're seeing. But compassion itself isn't actually suffering. You could argue.
So, like when my father-in-law passed away, and I missed him, but I cried and was sad because my partner had just lost his husband. Or had lost his father. And so that, for me, was that I was feeling horrible suffering for my husband. That's different than actually...
That's compassion, I would suggest.
That's compassion, okay.
I would suggest that's not suffering.
Okay.
But you see, we have a very broad way of interpreting suffering in our world, and here we better be quite specific in understanding what Buddha means by suffering. He means suffering is the first kind of suffering is when the bad things happen.
Right.
The second kind of suffering is being caught up in attachment and jealousy and fears.
Right.
And the third kind of suffering is even more subtle. Forget that one. So it doesn't mean having compassion. Compassion is compassion. Okay. Right. So it might feel sad, but okay, put it this way. Let's say you've got a lot of attachment. Then your compassion is also there, but it's your attachment which then causes anxiety. That's what causes the suffering, not the compassion. But they kind of come together. Okay. Let's say let's say your partner becomes an alcoholic. It'll be incredible suffering for you. Because he'll suddenly become neurotic, and he'll be inert, he'll become not trustworthy, he'll hide the bottles, and you'll get fights, and you'll be hurt and miserable. And then you'll have compassion as well. Well, the compassion is very pure, but all the other rubbish is why you suffer, because of his suffering. So we've got to learn to see that we can have compassion without suffering. It can be pure compassion. And that takes time to get there.
Okay.
That's why we've got to fix up our own mess first. You understand my
Yeah,
point?
absolutely. Thank you.
And then when there's really profound compassion at the advanced level, like where they talk about the bodhisattvas, they happily will be reborn into an environment like the Dalai Lama. He's said to be a fully enlightened Buddha, which means he's got no suffering left. He's got no karma to suffer. Not possible. All the karma's gone. But he chooses out of his immense compassion to be born as a Tibetan, to be involved in the pain of the Tibetans. But for him, he is sad that compassion is unbearable. But that's not really what we call suffering. He doesn't get dragged down by it. It continues to give him energy to never give up, to help them. But he's prepared to be around them, to want to help them. But he can never have suffering technically. In the way we think of it, suffering is neurotic and ego-based.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. That makes sense.
Before we continue here?
So with this teaching, I understand that if I were born into a really horrible situation because of my past action, so like for example, if I were to born into a family with a father who rapes me,
Right.
then, I mean, with this teaching, I would accept, okay, that's because of what I've done in the past. And am I supposed to just endure it, or is there, what are the
No, I
options?
mean, how you work with it is, it depends on who you are. So you always, that's why I use this example of those two young Tibetan nuns. I always quote the story of when, in 2003, when I was working with people in prison, Richard Gere in New York had invited His Holiness, and he had wanted to do some work with prisoners. So he invited 20 former prisoners, all of whom had done some kind of meditation in prison, to all come to New York to have a meeting, to talk about their suffering, and then to meet the Dalai Lama. So that's what happened. It was a very marvellous meeting, and I was there too. It was moving to hear all these people's experiences, all the black and white and Puerto Rican and Mexicans and being in prison and the dramas and the suffering, okay? He also invited two young Tibetan nuns. Okay, so they're brought up with his teachings. This is their teachings. This is the view they've had since they're born. They study it and they live according to it. So this is the point I'm getting to. So the consequences for them, this is the point. They talked about their suffering. They've been tortured and raped for a couple of years and sexually abused in prison, okay? So this is what we have to, that experience can happen to lots of people. We can see, according to what your view in your mind is how you respond to that, is it not? So this is what I'm getting at. Because they've been born with this view, they're applying this every day to their experience. Instead of, if you didn't have the view of karma, what is the normal view? The normal view is either it's God's will, which is pretty profound. Forget that one. The usual one is the materialist view, which is the instinct of ego, which is this is not fair, it's terrible, how dare, this is monstrous, and you're full of rage, you're full of fear, you're full of why is this happening to me? This is why you go crazy. It's not just, you see, we think it's just a torture that makes you harm. It really isn't. It's your view about it, your interpretation of it, and that's the thing we have to get to see. So ordinary, typical person, there's lots of attachment, which is this junkie mind that doesn't want suffering, just like a junkie. Then the anger when it doesn't get what it wants, which is the typical response when bad things happen, depending on how strong that attachment is, how strong the anger is, how strong the view that mummy made me, daddy made me, there's no reason for this, it's not my fault, I didn't ask to get born, the more you have that philosophy, which the Buddha would call the samsaric philosophy, which is the normal philosophy of the world, do you agree? Then what do you think you're going to respond? You'll have a mental breakdown, you'll go crazy, and depending on how much anger you have, you want to kill these torturers, and you'll be forgiven for killing the torturers. So if you have the other view, like these young women, then they weren't angry when they were talking. They were telling this experience to everybody else, and it was a big shock to the Westerners. They weren't angry. We don't trust that. We don't believe it. But with you've got the view of karma, and they practiced with it, you can't have anger, because anger says, why, how dare you do that to me? Why is this happening to me? You don't say that because you have an answer. Of course it's hard, but they are able to work with it. And then, finally, even at the end, they said, quietly, tears in their eyes, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers, because we knew we'd harmed them in the past. So these are easy words to say. But the real point here is what we've got to do, this is what's being seen, or I'm seeing from coming from that view to this view. It's not just overnight you change your view, oh, now you're all different. It takes years of work to apply the new view, because it's the view in our mind that is the main source of whether we suffer or not. But we can't see that initially. We just think that I'm suffering because of the torturer, and that it's normal I have anger, and normal I have resentment, and normal I have fear. That's what we think in our culture. But it's all a response of what's in the mind. Do you see what I'm saying? It's huge, and it doesn't just change overnight. That's why we've got to work on it, you know. And this is the shocking point. We can see it logically. We can even see if there's a person who's a really devoted Christian who loves God, can forgive easily because they know God is in everybody. That's a viewpoint. They've got that view, so therefore they change their own behaviour. There's a friend of mine, we had a conference years ago in San Francisco, 2008, not that long ago, and about happiness, and one of the components of it was people talking about restorative justice. And so we had a lawyer friend, and then I had a friend from North Carolina who worked with people in prison, worked with me, who worked with young black men. He happened to be black. First of all, his own son had been murdered, and that day the local news had him on the television and asked him, how do you think about the murderer of your son? And he was in tears. He said, his suffering has only just begun. We must take care of our young men. He was having compassion for this person who killed his own boy. Do you see? And he's a Buddhist, but you can see that's his nature. He's got this soft heart, and no anger. And he was able to see the suffering of the person who killed his own boy. That's view. That's view in the mind. Another one would want to have him murdered, and everybody would honour that and say, oh, that's normal. Then when we hear Andre say, we think, oh, well, isn't he different? It's weird. But it's all view in the mind. In the end, it's everything how you think. And then another example, a woman in the same little meeting on the stage in this conference, her own daughter had been murdered years before, raped and murdered. And she was using the restorative justice thing, and finally came to meet one of the murderers, the boys who killed her daughter. And this boy, first of all, was so happy, finally, after years, he was so relieved to be able to confront the mother and beg forgiveness and things. He'd been alcoholic or something, or he was on drugs and out of his brain, and so when they raped this girl, she was 16, they then him and his friend became convinced that they have to kill her now, So they basically executed her, gun in the head. And he told the mother what happened. He said, just before we killed her, she looked at us and she said, I forgive you, and God does too. That's view. That's view. Words are thoughts, right? And so those thoughts were in her mind. There she was, having been raped, now about to be killed, but she was able to conjure up this part of herself. So everything comes down to what's in your mind. And that's what we're trying to do here. Being a Buddhist, my choice, to cultivate the Buddhist explanations of why things happen. And then there's the experiential implication of that plays out in your life. That's what helps us change. So that's what takes time. Which means we've got to see our thoughts in the first place. You understand? Someone else here?
To jump back to the mouse, when the mouse was accidentally killed, and with great compassion you ended the mouse's life.
Okay, there's two. That's Tara's scenario.
Right.
She has a mouse and she sees that it's suffering, and then she kills it because of compassion.
Right. Now, does that also bring some type of negative karma?
Okay, no. Okay, let's go further here. I didn't complete the whole story there.
Okay.
First, we were talking about this from the point of view of particularly pointing out the role of motivation.
Okay.
That was the main purpose in that exercise. So Mary Ann had no intention, therefore no motivation, so you could say no karma. I had intention and I had negative motivation, so therefore negative karma. Tara had intention and she had motivation, but it was a pure motivation. So therefore you could say, even argue, she created virtuous karma. But, let's look at it. Now there's a but. This is not enough. As His Holiness says, compassion is not enough. We need wisdom. Or as Lama Zopa puts it, meaning well is not enough. So it's sort of like, we need wisdom. So it's sort of like I've got a headache and you've got a pill. And you just can't remember whether it's the cyanide pill or the aspirin. Well, I would prefer you mind your own business and let me keep my headache, because you've got compassion, honey, but you haven't got wisdom, right? So compassion's not enough. So we tend to think it is in the world. Oh, she meant well, so therefore, so it is fine for Tara, because she did mean well, but we have to ask, she should ask herself, which we never do in the world, well, I wonder if I did benefit the mouse, which is the point. And the only way from the Buddhist perspective you can answer that is knowing with confidence what karmic seed ripened in the mind of the death at the time she killed it, and whether and if it was a virtuous karma, which would be most unlikely, because there's the poor little mouse is already in freaking out fear and agony, and then she goes and kills it, even worse. So it's really be unusual if it had virtue in its little mind. only if it had virtue in its mind, which would then throw it into a good human rebirth where it can meet the Dalai Lama and get a Buddhist practice, only then could you say not only was she being compassionate, but she was also being wise. She actually helped the mouse. But you could still argue, depending on a simple example, we can still say, you can't say she created negative karma. No, because the motivation was to help, even though it wasn't wise. You could argue that. Even I remember Geshe Sopa saying, there's all many ways of dividing different kinds of karmas based on different things. And I remember him one time saying, even if you're forced to kill and you don't want to, like a lot of the Tibetans, were forced to kill. He says, when you even don't want to, you can't say that the karma's negative. You just can't. So there's many, but it depends on the person. It depends on the person. Let's say there's a person who really is an addict, has got lots of killing habits. They kill the bears, they kill the roaches, they kill the rats, they kill the fish. And then they would kill a mouse, even accidentally. You could argue, because of their habit, there's something there. It's because, and they would keep finding mice to kill because of this, So it's quite a subtle point, but the real point I'm trying to get at here is the emphasis on the power of motivation. How even, this is the Mahayana one, a negative action, which in itself is still negative. Yes, according to the strict reading of the first stages of practice, killing is wrong. The Hinayana would say there's still some negative there. But the Mahayana would say, depending on how powerful the motivation is, you could actually say there's no negative. And Lama Zopa says that, for example, there's always this story they tell about the Buddha in one of his past lives. He wasn't yet a Buddha, but he was highly advanced bodhisattva, which meant he had emptiness, powerful bodhicitta, clairvoyance, all these qualities, right? And he was the captain of some boat of 500 merchants. And he could see with his clairvoyance that one of these dudes was going to kill everybody else and take everything. So the story goes, his compassion for him, because he'd been born in the lower realms for countless lives, was so huge. He could do anything to stop this person from doing it. So the story goes that he decided he'd rather go to the hell realms, and he killed him instead. Now, if you're on that boat, you just see a regular guy kill somebody. You understand my point? But they always use this example, as Lama Zopa says, in the Hinayana discussion, the discussion at the first level of practice, there's still some negativity, like you indicated, because itself is a negative action. But his compassion was so huge that kind of in the end outweighed it. But the Mahayana interpretation would actually say, because his bodhicitta was so huge, and his realization of emptiness was huge, and his realizations were so huge, that there was no negativity. And not only that, it had hastened his Buddhahood. Because the extent of his compassion. Do you understand my point?
Yes.
So there's many, many scenarios. You can't make blanket statements, but in general my main point here is to indicate the Mahayana one of even in the case of doing what is labelled a negative action, if the motivation is pure, you would say there's no negative karma. You could argue. You could argue the compassion is so strong it outweighs everything else. But the point is too, the real point is it's not enough. You've got to have wisdom as well. For her, it's fine, but it wasn't cool for the mouse. She said, okay.
So,
Yeah.
so we're talking about the mouse as being the example. How do we take that into the suffering at the end of life of a human being?
Okay, well, I want to go into the death process, and I will do
okay.
that.
Okay.
And have we got time? We could do it now. We could start now, then we can have discussion. We can go into after lunch, yeah. Okay. So, right now, giving context, we're still in the... Yes, Catherine.
So my background's in natural resource planning, and staying with the mice. Mice can be what we call vectors of disease. In other words, they can carry disease.
Of course they can, yeah. Sure, we know that.
Human
Yep,
populations.
that's right. So then...
So, therefore, they are eradicated.
That's according to the Western materialist view. They don't have much of a brain. And because they offend humans, we feel we have the right to kill them. I agree, but that's not the Buddhist view, is it? That's right. That's not the Buddhist view. It doesn't.
Balance.
It's not a question of balance. It's not a question of balance. It's not a question of balance. If you're a Buddhist, you have a vow not to kill any living being whatsoever. There's no balance between only a bit of killing and a bit of not killing.
Okay.
You simply have the view that all sentient beings are equal insofar as they want to be happy and don't want to suffer. You have the view that that's been a human countless times, been your mother countless times. You have the view that you don't want to create negative karma. First and foremost, this one. So therefore, maybe you could argue killing a mouse because it harms others is less negative than killing a mouse out of anger. It's true, but there's still the imprint of killing going on in there. Because having compassion for someone else is why people kill anybody. That's why they have wars. You harm my people, so I'm going to harm you, like as if it justifies it. It's not enough, it's not enough. That's why the Dalai Lama would always insist on not having a war against the communists. Because it's a vicious circle, it never ends, never, ever, ever, ever ends. So even though we could be thinking, oh yeah, mice upset humans, so we kill them all, it's just creating infinite more negativity for all the humans who do it, and it's going to probably increase the mouse population. Because all those humans are going to become the mice. There's nothing else. So it's like a vicious circle, it's not the end. There's some virtue in there, but the bigger picture point of view is for a person who's a Buddhist to have the courage to be able to say, at least I, personally, do vow never to kill a living being, period.
So, the solution then between mice as vector of disease and human populations getting sick is to find a non-killing way to separate the two.
And that's what anybody who's trying to be a Buddhist will do with the lice, with the mice, with the roaches. And this is where now we go into more detail about the purification process itself. That the very process of doing these 4 steps of purification is the method to eventually create the cause to never have to meet a mouse to kill, to never meet the roaches to kill. Because if what we're experiencing now is the fruit of karma, then by purifying it, that will create the new fruits of not having to kill. So, you know, I mean, even recently, a person emailing me saying, she's not here, is she? Jenny, are you here? No. How, you know, it's different times in her life. She's lived in a house where she just had clouds of moths. Living in a house where there's just overrun by millions of cockroaches. Well, like I pointed out, we discussed, I said, well, they're your cockroaches, they're your moths. They're not in my house. I can tell you, since I've been a Buddhist, and I've lived in India in the rainy season, where when you walk on the road at sunset, it's a carpet of creatures, you know? It's like Jurassic Park. I remember in one hotel, and the glass door at sunset, it's like this Jurassic Park. It's like birds whacking on your glass door, you know, these great big creatures. Well, I can say, even though as a Buddhist, I've taken a vow to kill, I've never yet, in 37 years, I'm just saying, been in an environment where I've been forced to kill. That's due to karma. So that's why we've got to even take responsibility for the fact that we don't meet creatures to kill. Or we do meet creatures to kill. So that's why it's extra difficult if you are living in a house full of roaches. What am I going to do? You've got to really think it through. It's not that easy, you know. So from a bigger picture point of view of world health, I can't discuss it at that level. You know, it's too difficult. Well, you could. Tibetans as a people, this is the interesting point. Tibetans as a people, mostly 99% Buddhist, a few Muslims. I think the Jesuits went there in the Middle Age, the 14th century, the time of when the Tibetans were really strong with Tsongkhapa. They even translated all the Bible into Tibetan. The Tibetans weren't interested. They couldn't get any Tibetans at all. There's no Christianity. A few Muslims, I think, there. Anyway, I remember among the Tibetans, they didn't have many creatures. Okay, they lived in an environment where it was more up in the mountains, so not many creatures. All the way came down to India, to the plains, they were overwhelmed by the number of creatures. It is like Jurassic Park in India, you know, in the rainy season and things. So they just had the view. So the whole country was this way. So therefore, even the wildlife were practically not wild, because no one threatened them. And therefore they didn't ever have an environmental unbalance. They never had overwhelmed by millions of creatures here and millions of creatures there. But if you're humans thinking we're God, sticking our noses in and trying to make everything perfect, and going along to some island where you've got too many of this creature and we prefer to have that creature, so we're going to kill this one because we'd rather have this one. I mean, we're so like outrageous, you know, acting like God, act as if we're the boss of the universe. So then, of course, you're going to muck up the environment continually, and then all the imbalance of and then you're going to meet creatures in the future life where you're going to be forced to kill them, or you'll be one of those creatures. It's never ending, you know. This is like the big picture view. Do you understand?
Very good.
Yeah.
Very useful.
Good, Catherine.
So just one follow-up question on that. So say one day my child comes home from school with a head full of lice. So the first thing I think is, so these are my
Kill them,
lice.
that's right.
Somehow,
You're lice, so you try and take them out without killing them.
Okay,
That's
so you
all.
try to take them out without
Do your
killing
best.
them.
We've got to do our best, darling. All we can do is our best. The point is, everything exists on the tip of the wish, the first thought. I don't want to harm sentient beings. That everything that you do will come from this, and you do your best.
Okay, so then if you do kill some, is there something you can do? I mean, do you say...
What do you think we're talking about here? Mother of God, what do you think the 400 pounds is all about? What do you think this is discussion here in this room, the 400 pound purification is about?
Okay, great, excellent, I'm glad I'm here.
Thank you.
I mean,
Okay.
I'm
these
glad
are,
the penny just dropped.
well, sometimes I think it's the practical problems that really make this stuff
Of course,
much more clear.
it is. No, you're dead right, exactly. Yeah.
Quick question with regards to environmental karma. I just want to be sure that I heard you correctly, or possibly incorrectly. With regards to physical matter of earth, water, air, fire, did you say those 4 things are endless?
Beginningless.
Sorry?
Beginningless.
Beginning.
Whatever exists in this, okay, Buddha's simple way of putting it,
Okay.
whatever does exist at this moment,
Yes.
if it exists at this moment,
Yeah.
if you track back for a first moment of it, you will never find it.
Right,
That's
right,
the
right,
point
right,
I'm saying.
right.
But some of it is certainly endless. Delusions, luckily, are endless.
I don't know yet what I'm thinking about. I was thinking in regards to emptiness. And
I understand. We're going to go more detail. We'll go into this
Okay.
when we get to the
Okay.
whatever point we'll get to. It'll all unfold, I
Okay.
promise. Everything is in these 4. All the teachings will come.
Okay.
I hope I finish them on time. Okay. So let's do the death process. We'll begin the death process. We've got time still. Okay. This will get us now to answer more about the elements and everything. This particular way of describing the death process is coming from the highest teachings, from postgraduate, from Tantra, okay? And this is the same model of describing the universe as the Tibetan medical system, which is similar to the Chinese one. You know, they feel your pulses, and they feel the sattva energies and can see the causes of sickness and illness and can diagnose and rectify and blah, blah. So we go into details here, and this is getting to your point now about the elements. According to this model, we are made up of gross consciousness, which comes along inextricably with gross physical elements, gross body. Then we've got subtle consciousness coming along with its own set of the 4 elements. Okay, so sorry, go back, start. The universe is made of the 4 elements, the physical world, and we've got 4 elements and we have minds. And according to this model, the very way minds exist, with each individual being has its own set of the 4 elements. That mind is inextricably conjoined with each individual mind, is conjoined with its own set of the 4 elements. Okay, so here we have gross consciousness. So for us, this is the gross bag of bones. This is the gross energy with that our mind is joined with, inextricably. So you can't have I consciousness. Consciousness and mind are broadly speaking used synonymously, okay? And what mind or consciousness is the capacity to cognize something. So we have eye consciousness, and we all think of it's the eyeball. Fine, we have an eyeball. But from the Buddhist view, the eyeball is merely the physical level through which, the physical bit of us, through which consciousness functions to cognize shape and colour, which is the function of cog. But you can't have that consciousness if you don't have an eyeball. It's sort of obvious. So your existence of eye consciousness, which is consciousness and not body, does depend upon the existence of an eyeball. So the gross body itself, of course, to function properly, is inextricably linked with gross consciousness, which is the senses. And then indeed the subtle level of gross, which is all our gross conceptual thoughts and things, okay? This is dependent upon the functioning of this normal body. So when you start to learn to meditate, doing single point of concentration, this technique of the sutra practices, which Buddha took from the Hindus, which they created, this ability to get your mind to a subtler level, okay? Then even as you might, like I mentioned about Rene, the Swiss, you were here last time, I mentioned my friend Rene, the Swiss monk, who was talked about one of the retreats he did, going through the 9 stages of single pointed concentration. It's a sutra practice, not tantra yet. That even as he got his mind slightly more subtle, slightly more subdued, all the crazy concepts slightly subdued, which would also mean the activity of the brain is subdued. So as he got to a slightly subtle level, nothing not near as subtle as we're talking about in Tantra now, then naturally the gross concepts ceased, and you would have checked on him, and you would have seen that his grosser physical would have ceased. In fact, when you get a person who's done all the way to the 9 stages, has got single point of concentration, which means they've accessed a subtler level of their capacity for cognition, there would be no brain activity. They would look like they were dead, because they've touched to a subtler level of their mind, which doesn't depend upon this gross body. So of course the materialist world only posits the gross, isn't it? You see. So gross consciousness is our capacity for, especially the senses, and then you can say that the grosser conceptual states are there, but they're more maybe part of subtle consciousness. So then by the time you stop breathing, and I'm going to go through the death process, the grosser level of you is ceased. The 4 senses have ceased. You've lost the plot. You've no idea who you are, you remember what other people are, and we'll go through it. And by that point, you look like you're ready for the body bag. There's no sign of life. There's no sign of heartbeat. There's no brain activity. And this is very fascinating. I read a while ago a book called The Undead. It's not about zombies. It's this wonderful American scientist. I can't think of his name. Could you get me my iPad, darling?
Yep.
Thank you. He's this American medical journalist. He's very funny. He's written quite a few books, and it's hilarious. And it's all the findings as a result of the business of farming organs, you know, all the thing in organs now, organ harvesting, whatever polite word they use for it, you know. So, as a result of a lot of the anomalies that are coming to all the different countries and different states, how they all define what death is, there's a complete confusion about it now, because taking the usual ways of defining death, it just doesn't work anymore. And all the experiences of near-death experiences on the operating table, when they technically should have been dead, virtually temporarily while they're doing the operation, they just, as one doctor said, I can say without doubt that consciousness is not a function of the brain. I've got no idea what it is, but I can say it's not that. And all this is coming out. It's a very fascinating book. Thanks, Sharon. Thank you so much. I'll just get you the name of this guy later. I'll do it later. So anyway, gross consciousness, gross body. And we go through this first 4 stages of the 8 stages of death, and it's describing the process of deconstruction, or dissolution, as they say, the unpacking of the person, basically. And then we've got subtle consciousness. And that's the only time we ever touch that in daily life, is when we dream. Okay? So the components of the subtle body, as they call it, or our physical components at the subtler level, and this is where when you hear the Tibetan medical system, you've got this subtle nervous system, which is like 72,000 subtle channels or something, what they call. Then you've got the wind energies, or the prana, this is coming also from yoga, how they, the Hindu system, they're coursing through those channels, and then along with those wind energies, all of our mind, it's a very different way we talk about the mind, you know, consciousness, these different thoughts and conceptual thoughts and all the thoughts and emotions, all these different states of mind are connected to these wind energies, and they all course through these 72,000 channels, okay? And this is what they call subtle consciousness and subtle body, okay? Subtle physical. And the third component is what they call the red and the white kundalini, which is the subtle liquid energy, the gross aspect of which is the male sperm and the female blood, on how we want to call the egg and the sperm, you know. So they have this very detailed way of describing conception and all these things, using this model. And then you've got very subtle consciousness, and very subtle body, as they call it, or the physical, which is the complete break, the subsuming of these 4 elements down to the wind energy. And there's a subtle wind energy, more subtle than the air we breathe, all of this. So this very subtle wind energy, or the very subtle body, as they call it, is inextricably linked to this very subtle mind or consciousness, the subtlest level of our physical and mental being. And these are inextricably, indestructibly, inextricably linked. It's just natural that all minds are connected to their own set of 4 elements. Okay? So, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, so basically when you think about body, it's the 4 elements. Just the same as the 4 elements out there. The fire, the tree, the rock, Mount Everest, you know, the water. And each of the elements, the way they describe them, I think it's similar to the old Western model, Galileo and that lot, you know, they're all got the components of the other 4 elements. Each of them has got the components of the other 4 elements, but one is more predominant. Water is predominant in water, and so on and so forth, you know. Without the components of the other elements, they couldn't function. So there's elements, and this is exactly how they talked about the medical system years ago in our culture, but now they still, the Tibetan medical system, which is based on this one, which is the Indian, the Chinese, it hasn't changed since the time, you know. It's a discussion of health, and these wind energies, and they try many, many levels of wind energies that are fundamental to our health and to our very functioning as a human being, you know, as a being. So Tantra is a detailed explanation and understanding of this, and the great yogis can utilize and work with these energies, knowing them intimately and well. As Lama Yeshe says, Tantra's highly technological, you know. Okay. So, as Lama Zopa says, so the physical elements here are the same as the physical elements out there. Look at them, no difference. It just happens to be this set of the physical elements that's conjoined with Robina's mind. And of course, then we get very personal about it, This is me, hey. So, this is why it's interesting that the, never mind that one, that'll be later. Okay. So as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, and this is where we can understand karma, about the elements out there. Lama Zopa said, in the Kala Chakra Tantra, the words sutra and tantra are used in different ways. Sutra, in general, is a name of a type of text, but also it's referring to a level of teaching. All the general teachings of the Buddha, the Hinayana Sutra teachings, the Mahayana Sutra teachings. And they're the general teachings of Buddha about all the karma and compassion and all this blah, blah, blah. That's the Sutra teachings. And then you've got Tantra. So a Tantra is also referring to a text, but to a type of, a level of teaching. The more esoteric, the more advanced teachings. So, in the Kala Chakra Tantra, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche said one time, kind of briefly, that there's these detailed explanations of this intimate, interdependent relationship between internal and external energy. And internal is mind, and external is the elements. And so, over time, eons of time, the way karma is, when the mind is unbalanced, that is to say, negative, motivated by delusion, pollution, ego grasping, this pollutes our own physical energies, which in turn, this is what we're talking, in turn manifests in the future as suffering, sickness, lousy environments. So first sickness in your own body, karmically from life to life, which is how we described before, the results of karma. And this is a natural thing that occurs. So then, in turn, he said, externally, and this is over eons of time, what that negativity in the mind does, which first pollutes the energies of your own body, which causes sickness over time, then externally, this impacts upon the external environment, which causes the imbalance of the external physical energies, which is, war zones and terrorism and volcanoes and, natural disasters, as we call them. So it's all due to the minds. What minds do runs the universe, not God. Not a creator, not someone else out there, not dualistic, not merely the physical things, which is what the scientific world says. Minds, individual, and there are trillions of minds. Buddha would divide all sentient beings in samsara, as they call it, into the 6 realms of existence. You've got the human, you've got the God realms, which is really equivalent to heaven or paradise. The experience of subtle energy, their physical energies, their elements are manifested as subtle light, which is the result of a lot of virtue. So the experience is of enormous bliss, and it lasts a long time. Got heaven, paradise, or indeed, according to Buddhism, God realms. Except for the Buddha, it's not the end. It's the fruit of enormous virtue, goodness, which purifies the physical energies, which then causes a rebirth of subtle physical light energy to have as your body. Do you understand? Paradise, heaven, God realms. But you're still in samsara, Buddha says. Eventually the good karma runs out, the petrol tank runs out, and because you haven't realised emptiness, because you haven't cut the root of delusion, you've still got the karmic seeds of suffering, and you get suffering again. Gross suffering. Then you've got the humans, which is also the result of virtue, getting a human birth, like we suggested. Just the human birth. Then you've got, and there's another kind of God realm, never mind, there's a couple of those, and there's a human, there's 3 of the upper ones, as they call. Then you've got those realms that are the result of negative karma ripening at the time of death. So if in my case, around about May 1944, the consciousness in the past life, due to killing in the past, habit of killing, karma ripened to be born a dog, but I might have had history with that, with Teddy and Billy, but I got born as their dog. My mind ran to, like I said, we had a red setter, one of our dogs was called Janie. So there she was in the backyard. She wasn't born then, it was later, but never mind. Pretend Janie, the red setter, was in the backyard. And then there's Janie, in bed with her boy, her fellow, her Joe red setter. My mind was, I had the karma to be born in that environment, but I got born as their dog. Do you understand? So I got born as a red setter. That would have been the killing karma ripening to get a red setter, a dog's body. A dog physical energy. And look at a dog physical energy with respect to dogs. Hairy, heavy duty physical energy. So therefore the mind that is, the tendencies that would ripen. Okay, this is getting us now to when you get reborn. I'm leaping there a bit. Let me go through the process and we'll get to that one. Okay. Okay, so far so good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now what happens at death? It's roughly divided into 8 stages. And various things dissolve or absorb or stop or deconstruct at each of those stages. And it's all in your book here. And the death process is here. I'm pretty sure. Did I do it? I forget. Oh, I didn't do it. I completely forgot. I'm sorry, it's not in here. I forgot to do it. I'm so sorry. You just have to, whatever, you can find it. You look around, there's lots of it. You go Google, ask Google God, and you'll get the answer. Okay, so the death process. I'm sorry I didn't do it. I really forgot to do it. Forgive me. It was the most important one to do, and I forgot. Okay. So the first level, the first things that occur at the first of these 8 stages, and this is usually starts a couple of hours before you actually die. It can take days for some people, I've heard, but usually it's a couple of hours when it actually starts. And this, interestingly, is exactly the same process that occurs when you go to sleep. Physiologically and psychologically. Same deconstruction, same dissolution of the elements and the absorption, as they call it. It's just the same. Okay, so first, and you listen, you hear it. Your earth, first thing is to go, they call it the aggregates. We're made up of the 5 aggregates here. So the first one, according to the Buddha, is the form, the physical. That ceases to function. And the earth element ceases to function. So the earth element is what makes the body strong. And so when that ceases to function, the body becomes weak and thin and unmanageable, you know. And interestingly, the experience, and you have this when you go to sleep sometimes, when your body feels like lead and you're sinking into the bed. You feel like you're sinking into the earth. It's a very strong feeling. I remember one time when I was close to death, I didn't know I was close to death, I just felt terrible. It was in India. I had hepatitis of malaria, and one Lama said I was close to death. I remember having the experience of that. Being in a bed, I felt like I was literally sinking. The earth, I was like heading to death. I didn't die, obviously. But the earth element was ceasing to function. This feeling of sinking, you know. It's interesting. But you check when you're very tired, your body is like a lump of lead. You can hardly move it, isn't it? This is the earth element, ceasing. Then you've got, at the same time in this first stage, the eye consciousness ceases to function properly. You look when you're falling asleep and you're talking to your best friend, and your eyes, you just can't keep them open. When you're driving, it's inexorable. You can't stop that. You struggle to keep your eyes open when you're really tired, can't you? Because the elements are ceasing, and the senses are beginning to cease. The physical basis of the mind to function as an ordinary person are ceasing. So the mind is withdrawing naturally, because it depends upon the physical to function at this level. Consciousness withdrawing. Then at the same time, your body, the earth, the eye, what else? Well, anyway, they say in each of these stages, this is another one, there's subtle indicators. There's like a subtle sign that only the meditators can really get to see because they practice going through these stages. We have to practice trying to see them. So this is where there's a subtle feeling of like a vision of a mirage. And you think of what a mirage is. It's the interplay of earth and water, isn't it? So the earth element ceasing now gives rise naturally to the prevalence of the water element. So this is a smooth process. It goes gradually. So now the second stage occurs, and the capacity, the aggregate of feeling, as they call it, and then the ability to or the wisdom. That's right. They call it a wisdom at each point. The first one is the wisdom that can. What's the first one? Back to the first point. There's a wisdom. An aggregate goes, a wisdom goes, a sense goes, and the inner sign, and the element goes. Yeah. So the wisdom, the first one, is the ability to begin to distinguish between, I think it's between, I forget, I'm sorry, I just forget, I haven't got it and I forget. The second one, the ability to distinguish between pleasure, pain and indifference. So when you're really exhausted, who cares about the dinner? You know, usually on aeroplanes, when I travel on lots of planes, I always look forward to my dinner because I'm attached to food, you know. Even the crummy food, I don't care, I'm looking forward to the food. Yeah. But when I'm tired, and they wake me up to have a meal, I said, no thanks, I'd rather go to sleep. Who cares about food then? Because this wanting to absorb back into unconsciousness is very compelling, isn't it? It's pleasure, pain, indifference. Couldn't care less by this point, you know. They say pleasure, pain, has become kind of one. Couldn't care. You know, can't distinguish pleasure, pain, indifference. At the same time, the ear consciousness ceases. Now look at you, talking to your friend, and you just missed the last 15 seconds. You're embarrassed. You tried to pretend that you heard what they said. You'll be sitting upright, but your ear consciousness is dissolving, isn't it? So this is what happens now. It ceases to function. And then the inner side is this like the interplay of air, I'd say the water, and the next one, which is fire. We call it like smoky, but it seems like steamy to me. But they say smoke. I shouldn't say steam. That's my view, but excuse me, what do I know? But interplay of you think about it, interplay of water and then fire. They call it like smoky. This is the next subtle sign. Then now you get to the point. Did I miss something here? I think I missed something. Is the second one or the third? Second. Earth to water, the next one. So, the water to fire. That's the next one. So the third one, your ears go, then your eyes and your ears. The third one, you now can no longer distinguish between friends, enemies, and strangers. Your worst enemy's over here, and your beloved's on that side, and you've lost the plot. You can't tell the difference. You can't tell. Your, which consciousness goes now? Your taste, nose consciousness, the ability to smell ceases. The fire element ceases to function. The heat in your body stops, you can get very cold now. Important not to feel cold. Okay, the heat ceases. And then the inner side is now of like sparks. And if you think about it, there's the interplay of fire, and then the fourth one, which is air. So the fourth one, now, your ability to even, the wisdom, they say, the ability to even know who you are. You're gone. Your sense of who you are, how you fit into this world, who you are, your politics, your people. This whole big vision we have of who we think we are in our world, all things we like and don't like. You've lost the plot. You think of something, as Lama Zopa said, you think of what, you usually know the meaning of it, but now you can't even know the meaning of anything. You're losing the plot. Losing the plot completely. Gradually, you are deconstructing. Your taste consciousness ceases, your tactile consciousness ceases, your body stops. Even maybe the third stage, your body ceases to move. Your third stage, your body ceases. And the fourth one, your tactile consciousness ceases, tongue consciousness. And the tongue, they say, gets very short and turns blue at the root. And as I always like to quote, as Geshe Rabten, one Lama says, that tongue that spent its life gossiping is now completely useless. And now the breath stops, goes out and doesn't go in. So you're deconstructing as a person, The capacity to hold all this information, to see pleasure, pain, and difference, friends, enemies, strangers, your own self, the purpose of life, your work, who you are, your eye consciousness, ear consciousness, the five senses have ceased, your body has stopped. And by the third or fourth point here, though, already, this craving and grasping, which they talk about in the 12 links, rising very strongly, and they're just extra powerful levels of attachment. So the craving here is this usual grasping, but not wanting to die, holding on to the status quo, holding on to me and my body. Very instinctive. Excuse me. Are they ready for lunch?
We're just about ready. We're waiting for you to give me some kind of clue when we're at the end so we can put out the hot stuff.
Okay, put out the hot stuff. Coming now.
Clue.
So we'll discuss this and have questions afterwards. Okay, just finish the process. So then, what was I? Stop breath. Okay. You basically, Okay, the craving and grasping, thank you. So the very strong craving, and this is where you have to practice virtue, practice thinking about impermanence in your daily life, practice wanting a future human rebirth, or indeed a pure land of a Buddha. We'll talk about this later. You've got to focus on where you're going to go next, which is normal in ordinary life. You just don't walk out the door here and go, oh, well, where are I going now? No car, no money. No, you better have a plan. Well, the Buddha says the same thing. Better have a plan, baby. You want a plan is another human rebirth at the very least, if not the Buddha's lands. They'll talk about this one in a minute. So you have a plan, not just cross your fingers and hope for the best. Very superstitious, full of fear. So you have a plan. So you're craving, and then you're grasping, which is usually the one that gets you what you want. It's the grossest level of attachment. But this grasping, you have to train it on the grasping at the next life. Nourish then, because you practice by your virtue and all the rest, and that's when the good karma ripens, even before you stop breathing. This is already happening. Because the craving and grasping have to occur when the mind is still gross. Because by the time you stop breathing, you can't put anything together mentally. You've lost the plot completely. So now, if negative karma has ripened, you're going to be very unhappy at death. You see people frantic, freaking out, grasping, clinging, crying, seeing visions. Because the mind is getting more subtle, they're already seeing their future very unhappy life. This is why people have terrible suffering, tortured deaths. Other people die with radiance and bliss. They see light coming, they see the future, they see light, and they say, light, when you have negative karma ripens, and you're freaking out just before you stop moving, because negative karma is ripened, already you can see the future light coming, and it's not pleasant. And so it's a very, very unpleasant experience. And it's like going from light into dark. And then when you die blissfully, many people, radiant. And as your mind gets more subtle, your mind gets more blissful if it's virtuous. Because virtuous karma has ripened at that time, then they're radiant and light, and they're feeling very blissful. And they die with a very happy life. That's indicating they're going to get a virtuous, a positive human rebirth, a good rebirth. So then the next 4 stages, maybe we'll do that after lunch then. This is the first 4. So maybe just have lunch and then discussion. Even you grab an opportunity to sit 3 or 4 people and make the most of the lunchtime. I mean, you can do what you like. You can talk about football, watch television, I don't care. But I would advise you use the opportunity to sit and have a talk about. Small groups is good. 1 or 2 of the topics we've brought up and bring up questions and things. We need maybe an hour and a half, I think. We don't need to be too long. And then come up with some questions. If you want to be quiet, then be quiet. It's okay. Go for a walk in the snow, do what you like. But it's useful if you do that, yeah.
Would it be possible to get a copy of that file?
Of course it is, yeah. I'll email it to people. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I'm so sorry. The point is these notes. Yeah, I just went ahead and made a decision to spend the centre's money on these. So don't forget when you put your donations in there to cover the cost, because I mean the centre now is being so generous and just offering everything. But it's really important, there's a budget here, and they pay for me to come and pay for materials like this. You understand that? Just reminding you to feel generous for the centre. Just put in the bowl in there, offer the food and everything, whatever. So, what I'll do is, this is your printed one, but if you want a PDF of this, just email somebody at the centre and make a list, and I'll add the other thing to it, and you have the PDF with that in it. I'll do that. So just, you can just...
We set a sign-up sheet outside.
There you go. Okay, sign up and then Deborah can send it to you. Perfect.
It's better than Google Docs, just so we know when...
I'll do it. So have your break, enjoy your lunch. Let's think of lunch differently. Buddha wants us to think differently, like I said before. It's all about view, okay? So instead of seeing lunch through the filter of attachment and greed and just default and shove it in the mouth without thinking, we will think of it in terms, pretending we're a Buddha, so we think of it as radiant blissful nectar, as big as the universe, blessed with the energy of all the Buddhas, Om Ahum, Om Ahum, Om Ahum. And now the most important thing, as Rinpoche says, is to imagine offering it. So we have the big heart, huge generosity. We think if we could, we would offer it to all the Buddhas and all the Gurus and all the suffering sentient beings in the universe. And then we think of them all, as Lama Zopa says, the very meaning of the word offering is to visualize the recipients, in this case the entire universe, experience the incredible joy of receiving it. We imagine this. Lama Sangye Lama Che, Deje Lama Geton Te, Hungi Depo Lama Te, Lama Namla Che Pabu. And then very delighted to eat your lunch, and then have a little discussion. Go into small groups, discussion. Makes the whole day part of the course, Okie doke. See you in an hour and a half, whatever it feels like. We'll just keep track of it between us and work it out. Thank you.